She drained the glass of water he'd handed her, thinking it was a kind gesture after such a tense dinner. Tense because his mother had relentlessly interrogated her about her salary, while his father had bluntly declared she wasn't the best choice for his son's future. She had shrunk under their razor-sharp words, and he'd only offered a half-hearted squeeze of her hand in comfort. But now, as a heavy fog clouded her mind and her limbs refused to move, she finally understood. It wasn't just water, and his silence during dinner hadn't been weakness. She lay there, paralyzed but terrifyingly awake, listening as his voice joined his mother's in the next room, casually discussing how to handle her. That horrifying dinner hadn't been a test. It had been the first step in taking her down. The ultimate betrayal is just unfolding. We want to know what you think. Let us know in the comments where in the world and what time of day you're watching this from. If you're already hooked, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a single moment of this ruthless scheme. Finally, based on this chilling intro, rate the story's potential on a scale of 1 to 10. You're slipping, Clara. Again. Daniel's voice sliced through the dining room, his polished smile a blade aimed at Clara's chest. Her jaw tightened, teeth grinding as she gripped the edge of the white linen tablecloth. The Portland dining room, all sleek glass and sharp angles, felt like a courtroom, and Daniel Harper, her 48-year-old corporate lawyer husband, was judge and jury. Across the table, their neighbor Evelyn nodded, her lips curling with false pity, her eyes glinting like a hawk's. Clara, 45, an environmental scientist whose water purification patent could save millions, sat rigid, her fork trembling in her hand. Daniel leaned forward, his tailored suit creasing, his tone dripping venom. "You forgot the investor meeting. Embarrassed me in front of Klein's team. You're not yourself anymore." Clara's pulse hammered, her throat dry as she opened her mouth to protest. "I didn't forget. Stop." Daniel's hand shot up, cutting her off, his eyes narrowing. "Don't make excuses. You're unraveling, Clara. Everyone sees it." Evelyn's nod deepened, her fingers tapping her wine glass, a silent agreement. Clara's chest burned, her breath shallow, but she forced her face to stay calm, her hazel eyes locked on Daniel's. She wasn't unraveling. She'd been up all night refining her patent, her life's work, a technology to purify water for communities drowning in corporate pollution. But Daniel's words, laced with accusation, twisted her reality, making her doubt her own mind. He stood crossing to the kitchen counter, his movements deliberate, predatory. "You need help, love," he said, his voice softening but sharp beneath, like a knife wrapped in silk. He poured tea from a silver kettle, his back to her, and Clara caught a flicker of his hand. Something small, a pill, dissolving into the amber liquid. Her stomach twisted, a primal alarm ringing in her skull. "Drink this," he said, sliding the cup toward her, his smile too perfect, too practiced. "It's for your nerves." Evelyn's gaze pinned Clara, her smirk barely hidden. "He's right, dear. You look exhausted," she said, her voice syrupy, her eyes cold. Clara's fingers curled around the cup, the warmth biting her skin. She wanted to scream, to fling the tea in his face, but her body froze, years of his control chaining her instincts. She lifted the cup, her lips brushing the rim, the faint chemical tang hitting her tongue. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of betrayal. She sipped, her eyes never leaving Daniel's, searching for the man who'd once cheered her late-night lab breakthroughs. That man was gone, replaced by this stranger whose every word was a calculated strike. As the sedative seeped into her veins, her vision blurred, but her mind clung to a single image. A tarnished key slipping from Daniel's pocket as he cleared the table, clinking softly on the hardwood floor, unnoticed by him, but searing into her memory. The room tilted, her legs weakening, but Clara's resolve hardened. She wouldn't collapse, not in front of them. Her teeth ground harder, pain shooting through her jaw as she fought the drug's pull. Daniel's voice droned on, lecturing about her fragility, but it was Evelyn's smug glance that cut deepest, a conspirator's look. Clara's fingers tightened on the cup, her knuckles white, as she realized this wasn't just Daniel's game. Something bigger was at play, and that key, small, rusted, out of place, was her first clue. As her head swam, she vowed to hold on, to unravel whatever Daniel was hiding. The tea's bitterness lingered on her tongue, a promise of the fight to come. Clara's knees buckled, the sedative's grip tightening like a vice around her limbs, but she refused to crumble. "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," she bit out, her voice a low growl, each word a shard of defiance slicing through the haze. Her hazel eyes blazed, locking onto his, daring him to see the fire he hadn't snuffed out. Daniel's smirk faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his chiseled face, but he waved her off, his hand dismissive, as if her words were dust. Evelyn's lips twitched, her fingers drumming on the wineglass, her gaze sharp enough to draw blood. Clara's chest heaved, her breath ragged, but she forced her body to move, one deliberate step at a time, toward the bathroom door. The tarnished key's image burned in her mind, a lifeline anchoring her to the truth she was beginning to grasp. She stumbled into the bathroom, the cold tiles biting her bare feet, and locked the door with a click that echoed like a gunshot. Her hands gripped the sink, knuckles whitening, as she stared into the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, pale, eyes sunken, but her jaw was set, teeth grinding so hard her temples throbbed. The tea's chemical aftertaste coated her tongue, a bitter reminder of Daniel's betrayal. Her fingers fumbled to her pocket, brushing the tarnished key she'd scooped up when Daniel turned away. Its rough edges pressed into her palm, grounding her as the room spun. She wouldn't let him win. Not like this. Not after years of his subtle cuts, his concern that caged her, his voice that made her doubt her own brilliance. Clara's heart pounded, each beat a war drum against the sedative's pull. She splashed cold water on her face, the shock jolting her senses, forcing her mind to claw through the fog. Her thoughts raced to her lab notebook, left on the dining table, its pages filled with her water purification patent, her life's work, her fight for clean water in communities choked by corporate greed. Daniel's words echoed, "You're unraveling." No, she wasn't. She was a scientist, a creator, and she'd be damned if she let him paint her as broken. Her fingers tightened around the key, its weight a promise. She didn't know what it unlocked, but it was a piece of his puzzle, and she'd use it to tear his lies apart. Outside, Daniel's voice carried through the door, smooth and patronizing, talking to Evelyn about Clara's condition. "She's not coping," he said, his tone dripping with false pity. Evelyn's murmur of agreement was a knife in Clara's gut, confirming her suspicion. Evelyn wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was in on it, whatever it was. Clara's nails dug into her palms, the pain sharpening her focus. She leaned against the door, her breath shallow, fighting the drug's weight. Her mind flashed to the moment she'd sipped the tea, Daniel's eyes glinting with something cold, something calculated. She'd trusted him once, believed in the man who toasted her breakthroughs with cheap wine in their grad school days. That trust was ashes now, but her resolve was steel. She straightened, her legs trembling but holding firm, and wiped her face with a towel. Her reflection hardened, the scientist reawakening. She wouldn't confront him now, not yet. She needed to play his game, let him think she was weak while she pieced together the truth. The key in her pocket was her first weapon, a small, rusted clue to whatever Daniel was hiding. As the sedative dragged at her, she whispered to herself, "You don't get to erase me." Her voice was a vow, low and fierce, carrying the weight of years suppressed. She unlocked the door, her hand steady, and stepped back into the hall, her face a mask of fragility, but her heart a furnace of defiance. The dining room light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet to be uncovered, pulling her toward the fight ahead. Daniel's fingers froze on Clara's lab notebook, its worn leather cover open on the dining room table. The pages a testament to her brilliance, her water purification patent, equations scrawled in her precise hand. His smirk faded, replaced by a twitch at the corner of his mouth as he flipped to a new page, one he hadn't seen before. A sketch of a lock, jagged and crude, stared back at him, drawn in Clara's ink but with an urgency that didn't match her usual precision. His pulse quickened, a bead of sweat prickling his brow. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice low, sharp, like a blade catching on bone. He slammed the notebook shut, his eyes darting to the bathroom door where Clara had retreated, her defiant words, "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," still ringing in his ears. Had she seen the key? Did she know? He paced, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood, the sound a metronome to his rising unease. The tarnished key, now back in his pocket, burned against his thigh, a secret he hadn't meant to drop. It unlocked a safe in his office, holding documents that could ruin him. Contracts tying him to Margaret Klein's corporation, proof of their plan to bury Clara's patent. He'd been careless, letting it slip during dinner, and now this sketch, this jagged lock, felt like a warning. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding as he replayed Clara's steady gaze, her refusal to collapse under the sedative's weight. She wasn't supposed to fight back. She was supposed to fade, to let him control the narrative, to let him sell her work to Klein's empire for millions while declaring her incompetent. Evelyn's voice cut through his thoughts, her tone syrupy but edged. "She's getting worse, Daniel. You saw her stumble." She leaned against the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass, her eyes glinting with complicity. "The doctor's appointment tomorrow will seal it." Daniel nodded, but his stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with the nagging fear he'd underestimated Clara. He forced a smile, his voice smooth. "She's no threat. The pill's doing its job." But as he spoke, his hand slipped into his pocket, clutching the key, its rough edges biting his skin. The sketch haunted him. Had Clara drawn it before the tea or after? Was she playing him? In the bathroom, Clara leaned against the sink, her breath ragged, her fingers gripping the tarnished key like a lifeline. The sedative dragged at her limbs, but her mind was a furnace, burning through the fog. She'd overheard Daniel's phone call as she'd stumbled to the door, his voice cold, clinical. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer striking steel, forging her rage. The key, small and rusted, was no accident. It was a crack in Daniel's armor, a clue to his betrayal. She didn't know what it opened, but it was tied to the lie he'd fed her, the lie that her work, her life, was slipping away because of her own weakness. Her teeth ground so hard her jaw ached, the pain anchoring her against the drug's pull. She splashed more water on her face, the cold biting her skin, and stared into the mirror. Her reflection was pale, but her eyes were alive, blazing with a fury she hadn't felt in years. Daniel thought he'd broken her, thought his concern had caged her spirit. But that key, that sketch she'd scribbled in her notebook before dinner, was her rebellion. She'd drawn the lock instinctively, a fragment of her scientist's mind, piecing together the puzzle of his control. Now, hearing his words, she knew. He wasn't just undermining her, he was erasing her. Daniel's footsteps echoed outside, closer now, and Clara's pulse spiked. She tucked the key deeper into her pocket, her fingers trembling but resolute. She wouldn't confront him, not yet. She needed to stay sharp, to play the fragile wife he expected, while she hunted for the truth. His voice came through the door, softer now, laced with fake worry. "Clara, you okay in there?" Her lips curled, a silent snarl, as she forced her voice to quiver. "Just dizzy," she said, letting her words wobble, a performance to keep him off guard. She unlocked the door, her hand steady despite the drug's weight, and stepped out, her face a mask of exhaustion, but her mind a coiled spring. The dining room light flickered, casting Daniel's shadow long and jagged, like the lock in her sketch, a promise of secrets she'd tear open. "You think you can outsmart me, Clara?" Daniel's voice hissed through the phone, his words a venomous jab as he stood in his sleek Portland office. The city's pulse muted beyond the glass walls. His fingers gripped the receiver, knuckles whitening, as he spoke to Evelyn, his ally in betrayal. The tarnished key sat heavy in his pocket, a nagging reminder of the sketch he'd found in Clara's lab notebook. A jagged lock, drawn with an urgency that gnawed at his certainty. Her words from last night, "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," echoed in his skull. Not the frail whimper he'd expected, but a steel-edged vow that made his pulse spike. He drugged her tea, watched her stumble, But that sketch, that defiance, suggested she wasn't as broken as he needed her to be. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding until his temples throbbed, as he realized he might have miscalculated. He slammed the phone down, his tailored suit creasing as he paced, each step a hammer strike against the polished floor. Clara's notebook, now locked in his desk, haunted him. That lock sketch wasn't just a doodle, it was a crack in his plan to sell her water purification patent to Margaret Klein's corporation, a deal that would bury her technology and line his pockets with millions. He needed her docile, declared incompetent, but her steady gaze last night, her refusal to collapse, planted a seed of doubt. Was she on to him? He needed to find her, to gauge her, to smother any spark of rebellion before it ignited. His fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges biting his skin, a secret tying him to the safe where the contract with Klein waited, unsigned but damning. Daniel grabbed his coat, his movements sharp, predatory, and drove to the community center where Clara volunteered, a place she'd mentioned in passing, her voice soft but alive with purpose. The thought of her there, surrounded by people, teaching kids about clean water, twisted his gut. Not with guilt, but with fear she was slipping from his control. He parked, his eyes scanning the lot, and strode inside, his charm a polished mask as he approached the receptionist. "I'm here for Clara Bennett," he said, his smile tight, his tone clipped. "Her husband. She's not well." The receptionist hesitated, her eyes narrowing but pointed him toward a classroom. Daniel's heart pounded, his hand clutching the key like a talisman as he prepared to confront her. Inside, he saw Clara through the glass door, her hands gesturing animatedly as she explained a water filter model to a group of kids. Her face, usually pale under his shadow, was alight, her hazel eyes sharp, her voice steady. His stomach lurched. This wasn't the fragile wife he'd crafted. He pushed the door open, cutting off her sentence mid-word. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice a blade, slicing through the room's warmth. The kids froze, their eyes wide, but Clara's gaze met his, unflinching, her jaw tightening. "Not now, Daniel," she said, her words crisp, a warning. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, and hissed, "You're embarrassing yourself. You need rest." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers curling into fists, but she didn't back down. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm, and pulled her toward the hall, ignoring the kids' murmurs. "You're not well," he said, his voice low, cutting off her protest. "You're confused, Clara. Let me handle this." Her eyes flashed, a storm brewing, but she nodded, her shoulders slumping in a calculated act of submission. His chest loosened, thinking he'd won, but her gaze lingered on his pocket, where the key hid. As he let her out, her notebook flashed in his mind, the lock sketch a taunt. He needed to find Elena Torres, Clara's old lab partner, the one she'd been emailing. If Clara was talking, Elena might know too much. Daniel's fingers tightened on Clara's arm, his resolve hardening, but her silence was heavy, a coiled spring ready to snap. As they stepped into the parking lot, Clara's hand brushed her pocket, where the tarnished key rested, her secret weapon, a promise of the truth she'd claw from his lies. "Keep dreaming, Maya. Your ideas can change the world," Clara said, her voice steady, a spark of fire cutting through the fog of last night's sedative. Her hazel eyes locked onto the young girl's, a 12-year-old with a sketchbook clutched tight, her pencil hovering over a crude drawing of a water filter. Clara knelt beside her at the community center's worn table, her fingers steady despite the tremor in her limbs. A lingering ghost of Daniel's drug. The Portland classroom buzzed with kids' chatter, their energy a pulse that fueled her, but her jaw clenched, teeth grinding as she recalled Daniel's grip on her arm an hour ago, his hissed words, "You're confused, Clara," still burning in her ears. She wasn't confused. She was awake, her scientist's mind sharpening, the tarnished key in her pocket, a weight anchoring her to the truth. Clara's hand brushed the key, its rusted edges biting her skin, a reminder of the sketch she'd drawn in her lab notebook. The jagged lock, a rebellion against Daniel's control. She'd slipped it from his pocket last night, a small act of defiance after hearing his chilling phone call. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer, forging her resolve. She wasn't the fragile wife he'd painted her to be. She was Clara Bennett, the environmental scientist who'd spent years perfecting a water purification patent to save communities from corporate poison. Here in this classroom, surrounded by kids like Maya, she felt her old self stirring, the woman who'd once believed her work could shift the world. She straightened, her fingers guiding Maya's pencil to refine the filter's design, her voice calm but fierce. See this valve? It's your key to clean water. Never let anyone tell you it's impossible. Maya's eyes widened, her nod eager, and Clara's chest tightened, a mix of pride and pain. She saw herself in Maya, young, hungry to create, before Daniel's subtle cuts had dulled her edges. His interruption earlier, dragging her from this very room, had been a power play, his charm a mask for control. But his eyes had flickered when she'd met his gaze, a crack in his armor, and she'd played along, letting her shoulders slump, her voice waver, to keep him off guard. Her teeth ground harder, the ache grounding her as she pushed back the memory of his cold touch. Clara's gaze flicked to her journal, tucked in her bag, its pages filled with notes on her patent. And now, her suspicions. She'd written about the tea, the chemical tang, Daniel's too-perfect smile, and the key. Each word was a step toward clarity, a map to unravel his betrayal. She'd overheard his plan to erase her, to steal her work, and the key was her first clue, a piece of his puzzle she'd wheeled against him. She moved to another student, her hands steady as she adjusted a model pump, her voice a beacon of encouragement. Keep testing, Jamal. Failure's just data. The kids grinned, their trust in her a lifeline, pulling her from the cage Daniel had built. But her pulse spiked as she caught Evelyn's shadow outside the classroom window, her neighbor's eyes sharp, watching. Evelyn's fake concern last night, her nod to Daniel's lies, confirmed she was no bystander. Clara's fingers curled into fists, her nails digging into her palms, the pain sharpening her focus. She wouldn't let them see her falter. She turned back to Maya, forcing a smile, her voice steady. Your filter's going to save lives one day, she said, her words a vow to herself as much as to the girl. She wasn't done fighting, not for these kids, not for her patient, not for the truth. The journal in her bag felt heavier, its pages a weapon, and the key in her pocket a promise. She'd play Daniel's game, let him think he'd won, but her mind was racing, piecing together his lies. As the kids packed up, Clara's gaze lingered on the window. Evelyn gone, but her presence a lingering threat. A whisper of the bigger fight waiting just beyond the classroom's walls. You're killing yourself, Clara. Let me fix this, Daniel growled, his voice a jagged edge as he loomed in their Portland dining room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw anger in his eyes. Clara stood rigid, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, her fingers brushing the tarnished key in her pocket. A secret she'd stolen from him, a clue to the betrayal she'd overheard. She's out. The plan's working. Her heart pounded, each beat a war drum, as she faced the man who drugged her tea last night, his fake concern now a blade aimed at her spirit. The memory of her defiance at the community center earlier, teaching Maya and the kids, fueled her scientist's mind sharp despite the sedative's lingering fog. She wouldn't let him see her crack, not when Evelyn's spying eyes and his chilling phone call confirmed a plot bigger than she'd feared. Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but Clara jerked back, her eyes blazing. Fix what, Daniel? My work? My life? Her voice was a whip, sharp and unyielding, cutting through his attempt to control the room. His face twitched, a flicker of unease breaking his polished mask. You're not well, he snapped, cutting her off, his tone slicing her protest in half. You're forgetting things, missing meetings. I'm worried, Clara. His words dripped with false pity, but his eyes were cold, predatory, scanning her for weakness. She forced her shoulders to slump, her face softening into the fragile mask he expected. But her pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms, the pain grounding her against his lies. I'm sorry, she said, her voice a calculated quiver, playing the part of the broken wife. I didn't mean to worry you. Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his smirk returning, thinking he'd won. But Clara's mind was a storm, piecing together his plan to steal her water purification patent, to declare her incompetent, to bury her work with Margaret Klein's corporation. She'd seen Evelyn's shadow at the community center, her neighbor's gaze too sharp, too knowing. The key in her pocket, tied to the lock sketch in her journal, was her weapon, a fragment of truth she'd used to unravel him. She needed time, needed him to believe she was fading, while she hunted for answers. Daniel crossed to his briefcase on the counter, his movements deliberate, unaware of Clara's eyes tracking him. "I'll handle everything," he said, his voice smooth, a king dictating terms. "You rest. Doctor's appointment tomorrow." Clara nodded, her lips pressed thin, her heart a furnace of defiance. As he rummaged through his papers, a sealed envelope slipped out, its corner marked with a lock symbol matching her sketch. Her breath hitched, her fingers itching to grab it, but she held still, her face blank. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft, testing. Daniel's hand froze, his eyes snapping to hers, sharp as a blade. "Nothing," he barked, cutting her off, stuffing the envelope back. "Just work. You wouldn't understand." His dismissal stung, but Clara's mind locked onto the envelope, a piece of his puzzle falling into place. She moved to clear the table, her hands trembling with purpose, not fear. As Daniel turned to his phone, distracted, she slipped the envelope into her sleeve, her pulse spiking as she tucked it against her wrist. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a promise of secrets waiting to be unlocked. "I'll try harder," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread, feeding his ego while her eyes burned with resolve. Daniel nodded, his smirk widening, but his fingers lingered on his briefcase, as if sensing a shift. Clara's journal, hidden in her bag, held her suspicions. The tea, the key, the sketch. And now this envelope was another weapon. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a mirror of Clara's lost dreams. She wouldn't let Daniel erase her, not for Maya, not for the communities her patent could save. As Daniel retreated to his office, his footsteps heavy, Clara stood alone, her fingers brushing the envelope's lock symbol, her mind racing. Evelyn spying, the key, the phone call. They were threads in a web she was beginning to see. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, the one person who'd believe her. The envelope was a crack in Daniel's armor, and she'd pry it open. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she vowed to play his game, to feign weakness while her strength coiled tighter. The dining room's shadows stretched long, the lock symbol on the envelope a beacon, whispering of the bigger fight waiting to explode. "You're killing yourself, Clara. Let me fix this," Daniel growled, his voice a jagged edge as he loomed in their Portland dining room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw anger in his eyes. Clara stood rigid, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, her fingers brushing the tarnished key in her pocket, a secret she'd stolen from him, a clue to the betrayal she'd overheard. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a war drum, as she faced the man who drugged her tea last night, his fake concern now a blade aimed at her spirit. The memory of her defiance at the community center earlier, teaching Maya and the kids, fueled her scientist's mind sharp despite the sedative's lingering fog. She wouldn't let him see her crack, not when Evelyn's spying eyes and his chilling phone call confirmed a plot bigger than she'd feared. Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but Clara jerked back, her eyes blazing. "Fix what, Daniel? My work? My life?" Her voice was a whip, sharp and unyielding, cutting through his attempt to control the room. His face twitched, a flicker of unease breaking his polished mask. "You're not well," he snapped, cutting her off, his tone slicing her protest in half. "You're forgetting things, missing meetings. I'm worried, Clara." His words dripped with false pity, but his eyes were cold, predatory, scanning her for weakness. She forced her shoulders to slump, her face softening into the fragile mask he expected. But her pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms, the pain grounding her against his lies. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a calculated quiver, playing the part of the broken wife. "I didn't mean to worry you." Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his smirk returning, thinking he'd won. But Clara's mind was a storm, piecing together his plan to steal her water purification patent, to declare her incompetent, to bury her work with Margaret Klein's corporation. She'd seen Evelyn's shadow at the community center, her neighbor's gaze too sharp, too knowing. The key in her pocket, tied to the lock sketch in her journal, was her weapon, a fragment of truth she'd used to unravel him. She needed time, needed him to believe she was fading while she hunted for answers. Daniel crossed to his briefcase on the counter, his movements deliberate, unaware of Clara's eyes tracking him. "I'll handle everything," he said, his voice smooth, a king dictating terms. "You rest. Doctor's appointment tomorrow." Clara nodded, her lips pressed thin, her heart a furnace of defiance. As he rummaged through his papers, a sealed envelope slipped out, its corner marked with a lock symbol matching her sketch. Her breath hitched, her fingers itching to grab it, but she held still, her face blank. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft, testing. Daniel's hand froze, his eyes snapping to hers, sharp as a blade. "Nothing," he barked, cutting her off, stuffing the envelope back. "Just work. You wouldn't understand." His dismissal stung, but Clara's mind locked onto the envelope, a piece of his puzzle falling into place. She moved to clear the table, her hands trembling with purpose, not fear. As Daniel turned to his phone, distracted, she slipped the envelope into her sleeve, her pulse spiking as she tucked it against her wrist. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a promise of secrets waiting to be unlocked. "I'll try harder," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread, feeding his ego while her eyes burned with resolve. Daniel nodded, his smirk widening, but his fingers lingered on his briefcase, as if sensing a shift. Clara's journal, hidden in her bag, held her suspicions. The tea, the key, the sketch. And now this envelope was another weapon. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a mirror of Clara's lost dreams. She wouldn't let Daniel erase her, not for Maya, not for the communities her patent could save. As Daniel retreated to his office, his footsteps heavy, Clara stood alone, her fingers brushing the envelope's lock symbol, her mind racing. Evelyn spying, the key, the phone call. They were threads in a web she was beginning to see. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, the one person who'd believe her. The envelope was a crack in Daniel's armor, and she'd pry it open. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she vowed to play his game, to feign weakness, while her strength coiled tighter. The dining room's shadows stretched long, the lock symbol on the envelope a beacon, whispering of the bigger fight waiting to explode. "You're a ghost, Clara, fading fast," Evelyn sneered, her voice a venomous slash as she cornered Clara in the community center's empty hallway, her eyes glinting like sharpened steel. Clara's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until pain shot through her skull, her fingers tightening around the tarnished key in her pocket. The same key she'd stolen from Daniel, tied to the lock symbol on the envelope she'd swiped from his briefcase. Her heart pounded, a war drum echoing his chilling words overheard that night. "She's out. The plan's working." Evelyn's presence, once cloaked in neighborly warmth, now loomed as a threat, her smile a mask peeled back to reveal a predator. Clara's pulse spiked, her nails digging into her palms as she realized Evelyn wasn't just Daniel's spy. She was a cog in a larger machine, one tied to Margaret Klein's corporate empire. Clara stood her ground, her hazel eyes blazing, refusing to flinch as Evelyn stepped closer, her perfume sharp, her words cutting. "You're not fit to lead that patent project," Evelyn hissed, her voice low, slicing through the air. "You're weak, Clara. Daniel's right to take over." Clara opened her mouth to retort, but Evelyn cut her off, her hands slashing the air. "Don't bother. Everyone sees you crumbling." The accusation landed like a fist, but Clara's chest burned with defiance, fueled by the memory of teaching Maya at the center, her resolve to protect her water purification patent for communities choked by pollution. She wasn't crumbling. She was waking up, her scientist mind piecing together the puzzle of Daniel's betrayal, now with Evelyn as his enforcer. Her fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges grounding her as Evelyn's gaze raked over her, searching for weakness. Clara's mind flashed to the envelope, its lock symbol matching her journal sketch, a clue to Daniel's plan to sell her patent to Klein's corporation. "I'm not weak," Clara snapped, her voice a blade, cutting Evelyn's smirk in half. "You don't know me." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her lips curling, but Clara saw a flicker of doubt, a crack in her confidence. Evelyn leaned in, her voice a whisper. "Keep pushing, Clara, and you'll lose everything." The threat was a spark, igniting Clara's fury. She wouldn't lose. Not her work, not her voice, not to Daniel or his lackey. Clara's teeth ground harder, the ache anchoring her as she remembered Daniel's fake apology last night, his attempt to cage her with concern. Evelyn's role was clearer now, not just a nosy neighbor, but a spy feeding Daniel details, watching Clara's every move. Her visits, her muffins, her probing questions about Clara's health. They were all part of the plot to paint her as unstable, to steal her patent. Clara's pulse raced, her mind mapping the connections. The key, the envelope, Daniel's phone call, and now Evelyn's unveiled hostility. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, to confirm her suspicions. But Evelyn's presence was a warning. Time was running out. Evelyn turned to leave, her heels clicking like a countdown, but Clara's voice stopped her cold. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her words sharp, a challenge. Evelyn paused, her back stiff, then glanced over her shoulder, her smile venomous. "You're not worth saving, Clara. Stay out of our way." The words cut deep, but Clara's resolve hardened, her fingers curling around the key, its weight a promise. She wouldn't stay out of their way, she'd tear their plan apart. As Evelyn disappeared down the hall, Clara's breath steadied, her scientist mind locking onto the next step. Contacting Elena, decoding the envelope, finding the truth. The community center's walls seemed to pulse, the lock symbol in her mind a beacon, urging her toward the bigger fight lurking in the shadows. "You're digging your own grave, Clara." Evelyn's voice echoed in Clara's mind, a venomous barb that fueled her as she slipped into a secluded corner of a Portland public library, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until her temples throbbed, the tarnished key in her pocket a burning reminder of Daniel's betrayal. She'd overheard his chilling plan. She's out. The plan's working. The sealed envelope, snatched from his briefcase with its lock symbol matching her journal sketch, was now tucked in her bag, a ticking bomb of truth. Evelyn's unveiled hostility at the community center had confirmed her role as Daniel's spy, a cog in a larger scheme tied to Margaret Klein's corporate empire. Clara's pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms as she dialed Elena Torres, her old lab partner on a burner phone, her scientist mind razor-sharp, ready to unravel the web of lies. Elena's voice crackled through the line, steady but urgent. "Clara, you're not crazy. We'll get answers." Clara's breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she clutched the envelope, its lock symbol a mirror of the key's promise. "Evelyn's with him," she whispered, her voice a blade, cutting through her fear. "She threatened me. They're after my patent." Elena didn't hesitate. "Meet Tom Reed, my investigator contact. He's already digging into Klein's company." Clara nodded, though Elena couldn't see, her resolve hardening like steel. She wasn't the fragile wife Daniel wanted. Her work, her water purification patent, was her fight for communities drowning in corporate greed, and she'd be damned if she let him steal it. At a dimly lit cafe across town, Clara met Tom, a wiry man with eyes like a hawk, his questions sharp as knives. "Daniel's routine. What's changed?" he asked, cutting off her attempt to explain the key. "Focus, Clara. Details." Her jaw tightened, the ache grounding her as she recounted Daniel's late-night calls, Evelyn's probing visits, the chemical tang of the tea. Tom's pen flew across his notebook, his nod curt. "Klein's corporation has a history of burying green tech. We need hard evidence." Clara slid the envelope across the table, her fingers steady despite her racing pulse. Tom's eyes narrowed, tracing the lock symbol. "This is big," he said, his voice low, a spark igniting in Clara's chest. She was on the right path. But Evelyn's threat, "Stay out of our way," loomed, a warning of the danger closing in. Tom instructed Clara to collect a hair sample to test for poisoning. His words were a lifeline. Back home, with Daniel at work, Clara slipped into their bathroom, her hands shaking as she plucked strands from her brush, tucking them into a Ziploc bag. Every creak of the house sent her heart hammering, Evelyn's eyes flashing in her mind, watching from the shadows. She hid the bag in her journal, its pages now a war map, notes on the tea, the key, the envelope, and now the hair sample. Her teeth ground, the pain sharpening her focus as she recalled Daniel's fake apology, his attempt to cage her with concern. She wouldn't drink his tea again, wouldn't trust his smiles. Her scientist's mind was awake, piecing together the puzzle. The key, the lock symbol, Evelyn's role, Daniel's plan. Tom's next move was a recorder, a sleek device Clara planted in Daniel's office under the guise of bringing him coffee. Her hands trembled as she set the mug down, the recorder tucked in her sleeve. "You're up early," Daniel said, his voice a smooth blade, his eyes narrowing as she fumbled the spoon, bending to retrieve it. She slid the recorder under a stack of papers, her pulse a thunderclap, the lock symbol on the envelope flashing in her mind. "Just helping," she mumbled, her voice soft, playing the fragile wife. Daniel's smirk returned, but his gaze lingered, suspicious. She fled, her heart racing, the recorder a ticking bomb in his lair. Days later, Tom played the recording over a secure call. Clara and Elena huddled over the burner phone in a motel room, away from Evelyn's prying eyes. Daniel's voice filled the air, cold and precise, talking to Evelyn. "Klein's ready to pay. Once Clara's declared incompetent, the patent's ours." Evelyn's laugh was a knife twisting in Clara's chest. "She's fading fast," Evelyn said, her words a mockery of Clara's strength. Clara's nails dug deeper, blood prickling her palms as fury surged. The recording confirmed her suspicions. Daniel and Evelyn were working with Margaret Klein to steal her patent, to bury her technology for profit. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a vow. She'd unlocked their lies. Tom's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "We need more. The envelope's a start, but we need Klein's contract." Clara nodded, her mind racing, mapping the next step. She'd mail the hair sample to Tom's lab, confirming the poison, and dig deeper into the envelope's contents. Her thoughts flashed to Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a reminder of why she fought. She wasn't just saving herself, she was saving her work, her legacy for communities like Maya's. Evelyn's threat echoed, but Clara's resolve was iron. She'd play Daniel's game, feign weakness, but her strength was sharpening, ready to cut through their web. As she hung up, her fingers brushed the key, the lock symbol in her journal a beacon, pulling her toward the truth waiting to explode. "You're nothing without me, Clara," Daniel's voice sneered in her memory, a vicious echo as Clara hunched over the burner phone in the motel room. Her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The tarnished key in her pocket burned, its rusted edges a lifeline tying her to the lock symbol on the sealed envelope she'd stolen from his briefcase. A symbol matching the sketch in her journal, a rebellion against his betrayal. The recording she'd planted in his office, its chilling words. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." Confirmed Daniel's plan with Evelyn and Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. Her heart pounded, a war drum fueling her fury as she and Elena pored over the envelope's contents, Tom Reed's voice crackling through the secure call. "Open it, Clara! Now!" he urged, his tone a blade cutting through her hesitation. Her nails dug into her palms, the pain grounding her as she ripped the seal, her scientist's mind razor-sharp, ready to expose the truth. The envelope spilled its secrets, a contract, its pages crisp, damning, signed by Daniel and Margaret Klein, CEO of Klein Innovations. Clara's breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she scanned the words. Terms to declare her mentally incompetent, transferring her patent rights to Klein's corporation for millions, ensuring her technology would be buried to protect their polluting empire. "They're killing communities," she whispered, her voice a snarl, her eyes blazing with rage. Elena's hand gripped hers, steady but fierce. "This is bigger than you, Clara. They've done this before." Tom's voice cut in, sharp as a whip. "Klein's buried green tech for years. Your patent threatens their profits." Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding harder, the ache a tether to her resolve. The key in her pocket, the lock symbol, the recording, they weren't just clues to Daniel's betrayal. They were threads in a corporate conspiracy poisoning the world she'd fought to save. Her mind flashed to Maya, the girl at the community center, her sketchbook filled with dreams of clean water. Clara's patent was for kids like her, for towns choked by corporate greed, and Daniel was selling it out. Her chest burned, fury surging as she read deeper into the contract. It outlined a plan to discredit her. Fake medical reports, Evelyn's testimony about her fragility, Daniel's manipulation of her exhaustion. "They planned this," she growled, her voice low, cutting through the motel's silence. Elena's eyes narrowed, her nod curt. "We've got them, Clara, but we need to move fast." Tom's voice crackled again, urgent. "Klein's got lawyers. They'll bury this unless we go public." Clara's fingers curled around the key, its weight a vow. She'd expose them no matter the cost. The contract revealed more. Klein's corporation had suppressed other technologies, buying patents to lock them away, leaving communities like Maya's to suffer. Clara's stomach twisted, the truth a physical blow. Daniel wasn't just betraying her. He was betraying the world, trading lives for profit. Her thoughts raced to the hair sample she'd sent Tom, the test confirming tetrotoxin poisoning, proof Daniel had drugged her to make her seem unstable. The recording, the envelope, the key, they were her arsenal, but the truth was her weapon. "They thought I'd break," she said, her voice a blade, slicing through her fear. Elena's gaze locked onto hers, fierce. "You're not broken. You're their nightmare." Clara's lips curled, a silent snarl, as she nodded, her resolve iron. Tom's plan was clear. Use the contract and recording at the upcoming Seattle Environmental Conference, where Klein would be speaking. Clara's heart thundered, the stakes higher than ever. Evelyn's threat, "Stay out of our way," loomed, her spying eyes a constant danger. Clara's fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges a promise to unlock the safe in Daniel's office, where more evidence might hide. She'd play the fragile wife, let Daniel think he'd won, but her mind was a furnace, forging a plan to shatter their lies. Her journal tucked in her bag held every detail. The T, the key, the lock symbol, the recording, and now this contract was the final piece. She thought of Maya's eager eyes, her own dreams buried under Daniel's control, and vowed to fight for them both. As Elena and Tom mapped the next steps, Clara stood, her hands steady, her scientist's mind plotting each move. The contract was a bombshell, but the conference would be her battlefield. Evelyn's role, Daniel's poison, Klein's greed. They'd underestimated her, and she'd make them pay. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she slipped the contract back into her bag, the lock symbol a beacon in her mind. The motel room's shadows pulsed, the key in her pocket a ticking clock, whispering of the reckoning waiting to erupt. "You're a liability, Clara," Evelyn spat, her voice a venomous slash as she blocked Clara's path in the deserted Portland warehouse, her eyes glinting like a predator's in the dim light. Clara's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until pain seared her skull, her fingers clutching the tarnished key in her pocket. The key she'd stolen from Daniel, tied to the lock symbol on the contract that exposed his plan with Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. The recording she'd planted, Daniel's chilling words, "She's fading fast, the patent's ours," and the hair sample confirming tetrotoxin poisoning burned in her mind, fueling her fury. Evelyn's threat at the community center, "Stay out of our way," had lured Clara here under the pretense of answers. But now two hired thugs flanked Evelyn, their fists curled, their presence a physical threat. Clara's pulse thundered, her nails digging into her palms, blood prickling as her scientist's mind raced, calculating her escape. Evelyn stepped closer, her heels clicking like a countdown, her smirk a blade. "You should have stayed down, Clara." Weak, like Daniel said. Clara's chest burned, her breath sharp as she snapped, "I'm not weak." Evelyn cut her off, her hands slashing the air. "Don't talk. You're done." The thugs advanced, one grabbing Clara's arm, his grip iron, twisting until her shoulder screamed. She yanked free, her heart hammering, her eyes darting for an exit. The warehouse's shadows loomed, but Clara's mind was a furnace, flashing to Maya, the girl at the community center, her dreams of clean water tied to Clara's patent. She wouldn't let Evelyn, Daniel, or Klein's goons bury her work, or her. "You're in too deep," Evelyn hissed, her voice a knife, cutting off Clara's attempt to speak. "Klein's paying big to keep your tech locked away. You're just collateral." Clara's fury surged, her teeth grinding harder, the ache anchoring her against the fear. The contract she'd found, the lock symbol matching her journal's sketch, revealed Klein's history of suppressing green tech. And Evelyn was their enforcer, not just a spy. Clara's fingers tightened on the key, its rusted edges biting her skin, a vow to fight for the communities her patent could save. She lunged toward a stack of crates, dodging a thug's grab, her body moving on instinct. "You can't stop me," she snarled, her voice a blade slicing through Evelyn's smirk. The second thug charged, his fist swinging, but Clara ducked, her scientist's precision guiding her. She grabbed a metal pipe from the floor, her hands steady despite the pain shooting through her arm. "Back off!" she shouted, swinging the pipe, her eyes blazing. Evelyn laughed, a cold mocking sound, but her gaze flickered with doubt as Clara stood her ground. The thugs hesitated, their fists still raised, and Clara's mind raced, mapping the warehouse's layout, searching for a way out. The key in her pocket was her anchor, tied to the safe in Daniel's office, where more evidence waited. She needed to survive this, to reach Elena and Tom, to expose Klein's conspiracy at the Seattle conference. Evelyn's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "Finish her!" she barked, her composure cracking. The thugs lunged, but Clara swung the pipe again, connecting with one's knee, his grunt echoing as he stumbled. She bolted toward a side door, her heart a war drum, her legs burning as she dodged crates. Evelyn's scream followed, "You'll regret this!" But Clara's resolve was iron, her thoughts on the contract, the recording, the hair sample. She'd played Daniel's fragile wife, but here, in this trap, she was a fighter. The door was steps away, but a thug's hand grazed her shoulder, yanking her back. Clara twisted, her elbow slamming into his jaw, her fury a wildfire. She burst through the door, her breath ragged, the key in her pocket a ticking bomb, promising a reckoning as she ran into the night. Evelyn's threats echoing behind her. "You'll never outrun us, Clara." Evelyn's scream echoed in Clara's ears as she stumbled through Portland's back alleys, her lungs burning, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The tarnished key in her pocket bit into her thigh, a lifeline tying her to the lock symbol on the contract she'd stolen from Daniel's briefcase, proof of his plan with Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. Her heart thundered, each beat a war drum as she replayed the warehouse ambush. Evelyn's thugs nearly crushing her, her desperate escape fueled by the recording's chilling words. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." The hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin poisoning and the contract exposing Klein's corporate greed were her weapons. But she needed more. Irrefutable evidence to bury them at the Seattle conference. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as her scientist mind raced, plotting her next move. Clara ducked into a shadowed doorway, her breath ragged, her eyes scanning for Elena's car. Her old lab partner's voice had been a lifeline on the burner phone minutes ago. "Get to Daniel's office. The key's your shot." Clara's fingers curled around the key, its rusted edges grounding her against the fear. The warehouse fight had left her bruised, her shoulders screaming from the thug's grip. But her resolve was iron. She'd fought for Maya, the girl at the community center, for communities choking on corporate pollution. Her patent was their salvation, and she wouldn't let Daniel or Evelyn steal it. A car screeched to a stop, Elena's face sharp behind the wheel, Tom Reed in the passenger seat, his hawk-like eyes locked on her. "Move!" Elena snapped, her voice a blade, cutting through Clara's hesitation. Clara dove into the back seat, her pulse hammering as Elena floored the gas, tires squealing. "They're tailing us," Tom barked, his head craning to check the rear view. Clara's stomach twisted. Evelyn's threat. "You'll regret this," ringing in her skull. She clutched the key, her mind flashing to the lock symbol, the contract's damning words. Daniel and Klein's plan to declare her incompetent, to bury her tech for profit. "The safe in his office," Clara said, her voice a snarl, cutting through the car's tension. "The key fits it. There's more evidence." Tom nodded, his pen flying across a notebook, his words sharp. "We get the safe's contents. We've got them cold." Clara's teeth ground, the ache anchoring her as she pictured Daniel's smug face, his fake concern caging her for years. They reached Daniel's law firm, its glass facade looming, but the late hour left it empty. Clara led the way, her hands trembling but steady, the key her guide. The office was dark, Daniel's desk a fortress of secrets. She knelt, her fingers probing for the safe, her pulse a thunderclap as she found it hidden beneath a panel. The key slid in, the lock clicking open with a sound like a gunshot. Her breath hitched, her scientist's precision guiding her as she pulled out a flash drive and a stack of documents. Tom's eyes narrowed, scanning the pages, his voice low. Emails between Daniel and Klein, dates, payments, a video file. Clara's heart surged, her fury a wildfire as she plugged the drive into Tom's laptop, her hands steady despite the bruises on her knuckles. The video loaded, Daniel's face filling the screen, his voice cold, precise, speaking to Klein. "The poison's slow. She'll be out by the conference. The patent's yours." Klein's laugh was a knife twisting in Clara's chest. "Good. No one'll miss her tech, or her," she said, her words a mockery of Clara's fight. The footage shifted, showing Daniel slipping a pill into Clara's tea, his movements deliberate, caught on a hidden camera Clara hadn't known existed. Her nails dug deeper, blood welling, as rage surged. "They taped it," she growled, her voice a blade, slicing through her fear. Elena's hand gripped her shoulder, fierce. "This is your silver bullet, Clara." Tom nodded, his eyes blazing. "We take this to the conference. They're done." Clara's mind raced, mapping the plan. The Seattle conference was tomorrow. Klein's keynote on their stage. The video, the contract, the hair sample. They were her arsenal, but Evelyn's thugs were still out there. And Daniel's suspicion was growing. She thought of Maya's sketchbook, her dreams of clean water, and her resolve hardened. "They thought I'd break," she said, her voice low, cutting through the office's silence. Tom's gaze met hers sharp. "They underestimated you. Let's move." Clara tucked the flash drive into her pocket, the key beside it, its weight a vow. She'd played the fragile wife, let Daniel think he'd won, but her strength was a coiled spring, ready to snap. As they slipped out, headlights flashed outside, Evelyn's car idling in the lot. Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding as she ducked behind a desk, Elena and Tom crouching beside her. "She's tracking us," Elena whispered, her voice a hiss. Clara's fingers curled around the flash drive, the lock symbol in her journal flashing in her mind. A beacon of truth. They needed to reach the conference, to expose Daniel and Klein before Evelyn's goons closed in. Clara's breath steadied, her scientist's mind plotting each step, her fury a furnace. The video was her weapon, but the stakes were higher now. Evelyn's pursuit, Daniel's lies, Klein's greed. She wouldn't stop, not for Maya, not for herself. The office's shadows pulsed, the flash drive in her pocket a ticking bomb, whispering of the showdown waiting to erupt. "You're finished, Clara," Daniel hissed, his voice a venomous blade as he seized the microphone at the Seattle Environmental Conference. His tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw menace in his eyes. Clara stood at his side, her hand trembling in his grip, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, playing the frail wife he expected. The tarnished key in her pocket burned, tying her to the lock symbol on the stolen contract, the flash drive with the damning video, and the hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin poisoning, her arsenal against his betrayal, overheard that night. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." Evelyn's thugs had nearly crushed her in the warehouse, but the video from Daniel's safe, showing him drugging her tea, was her silver bullet, ready to fire. Her pulse thundered, her nails digging into her palms, blood prickling as her scientist's mind sharpened, poised for the kill. Daniel's voice boomed, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "My wife's struggling," he said, his tone heavy with false concern, his eyes glinting with triumph. "She needs care, a hospital stay." The audience of scientists and activists gasped, their pity a wave crashing over Clara, but her chest burned with fury, fueled by Maya's dreams of clean water, her patent's promise to save communities. "Don't speak for me," she snapped, her voice a whip, slicing his words in half. Daniel's grip tightened, his smile faltering, but he cut her off, his voice sharp. "You're confused, Clara. Let me handle this." The crowd leaned in, their eyes on her, but Clara's gaze flicked to Elena, near a marble pillar, her nod a lifeline, signaling the plan was live. Clara yanked her hand free, her heart hammering, and strode to the stage, each step shedding her fragility. "Enough lies," she growled, snatching the microphone from Daniel's hand, her eyes blazing, his face drained of color, his mouth opening. But she cut him off, her voice a blade. "You architected betrayal, Daniel, not love." The crowd stilled, their breath held as Clara signaled Elena. The massive screen behind her flickered, Tom Reed's tech overriding the feed. Daniel's voice filled the room, cold and precise from the video. "The poison's slow. She'll be out by the conference. The patent's yours." Margaret Klein's laugh followed, a knife in Clara's chest. "No one'll miss her tech. Or her." Gaffs erupted, the audience's eyes darting to Daniel and Klein. Seated in the front row, her face paling. The footage shifted, showing Daniel slipping a pill into Clara's tea, his movements deliberate, caught on the hidden camera from his safe. Evelyn, in the crowd, froze, her smug smile collapsing as her spying role flashed on screen. Emails exposing her as Klein's informant. Clara's teeth ground, the ache anchoring her as she faced the crowd, her voice clear, cutting. "They poisoned me to steal my patent, to bury clean water for profit." Daniel lunged, his voice a snarl. "That's fake." But Elena stepped forward, blocking his path, her eyes fierce. "It's real," Clara said, her words a hammer, smashing his facade. Klein stood, her composure crumbling, but Clara's gaze pinned her, unwavering. "You thought I was a ghost," she said, her voice iron. "But I'm here, and I remember." The crowd erupted, whispers turning to shouts, their shock a validation of Clara's truth. Daniel's eyes blazed, his voice a desperate hiss. "You'll pay for this." But Clara stood tall, her scientist mind a fortress, her fury a wildfire. The hair sample, the contract, the video, they were her proof, and the crowd was her jury. Elena's hand grazed her shoulder, a quiet strength, as Tom's voice crackled through a hidden earpiece. "Cops are here!" Police surged through the doors, their steps steady, cuffs gleaming. "Daniel Harper, Margaret Klein," an officer barked. "You're under arrest." Daniel's face twisted, his snarl a final claw at Clara's resolve. But she held his gaze, her heart steady, the key in her pocket, a vow fulfilled. Klein's head bowed, her empire crumbling, as Evelyn slipped toward the exit, her betrayal laid bare. Clara's voice rose, addressing the crowd. "This patent is for you, for communities fighting for clean water." The audience roared, their awe replacing pity, her strength a beacon. Daniel's threat echoed, "You'll pay." But Clara's resolve was iron, her thoughts on Maya, on the communities her work would save. The screen looped the video, a relentless truth, as Clara stepped back, her breath steady, her scientist's mind plotting the next fight. The conference hall pulsed, the tarnished key in her pocket a silent promise, whispering of the justice still to come. "You'll pay, Clara," Daniel's snarl echoed in her mind, a venomous claw as Clara stood in the Portland courtroom, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. The tarnished key now on a chain around her neck, pressed against her skin, a reminder of the lock symbol on the contract, the video exposing Daniel's poisoning, and the hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin. Her arsenal that shattered his plan at the Seattle conference. Her heart pounded, a steady drum, as she faced the judge, her scientist mind sharp, her resolve iron. Daniel, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn sat in the dock, their faces pale, their empires crumbling under the weight of her truth. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as she recalled Daniel's chilling words overheard that night. She's fading fast, the patent's ours. She hadn't faded. She'd ignited. The judge's gavel cracked, a sound like a gunshot as he read the verdict. Daniel Harper, Margaret Klein, guilty of conspiracy and attempted poisoning. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, but Clara stood tall, her hazel eyes blazing, her voice silent, but her presence a blade. Daniel's gaze met hers, his eyes burning with defiance, but she didn't flinch. "You thought you'd erase me," she whispered under her breath, her words a vow cutting through the air. Klein's head bowed, her corporate mask shattered, while Evelyn's smug smirk was gone, her role as spy laid bare by the video and emails shown at the conference. The judge continued, his voice stern. "The patent is restored to Clara Bennett. Klein Innovations is under investigation." Clara's chest surged, her fury cooling into triumph. Her work, her water purification patent, returned to her hands. Daniel lunged forward, his voice a desperate hiss. "This isn't over!" The bailiff grabbed him, cuffs gleaming, but Clara's gaze held steady, her teeth grinding, the ache anchoring her. "It is for you," she said, her voice low, a final slash. The contract, the video, the hair sample, they'd been her weapons, and the courtroom was her battlefield. Every loose end tied, Evelyn's financial motives exposed, Klein's greed dismantled, Daniel's betrayal punished. The crowd murmured, their awe replacing the pity she'd endured at the conference. Clara's fingers brushed the key on her chain, its rusted edges a symbol of her unlocked strength. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her dreams of clean water now within reach because of Clara's fight. As Daniel was led away, his snarl fading, Clara's breath steadied, her scientist's mind already turning to the future. The patent was hers, but the fight wasn't just for her. It was for communities choking on corporate pollution. Elena, standing beside her, squeezed her hand, her eyes fierce. "You did it," she said, her voice a spark. Tom Reed nodded from the back, his hawk-like gaze softening with respect. Clara's resolve hardened, her heart a furnace, as she vowed to use her victory to build something greater. The courtroom doors swung open, the crowd parting, their whispers now of admiration, not doubt. The key around her neck gleamed, a quiet promise of the legacy she'd forge, a beacon whispering of the hope waiting to rise. "You broke her, Daniel, but she rebuilt the world." Elena's voice sliced through the courtroom's tension, her words a fierce jab as Clara stood beside her, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until pain seared her skull. The tarnished key hung around her neck, its rusted edges pressing into her skin, a symbol of the lock she'd opened. Daniel's betrayal, exposed by the contract, the video of him poisoning her tea, and the hair sample proving tetrodotoxin. The courtroom verdict had crushed Daniel, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn, restoring Clara's water purification patent. But his final snarl, "This isn't over," lingered like a shadow. Her heart pounded, a steady drum, as she faced Daniel one last time, his cuffs gleaming, his eyes burning with defiance. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as her scientist's mind churned, not with fear but with purpose. She'd turn her pain into hope. Daniel's voice cracked, his polished mask shattered as he spoke from the dock. "I was wrong, Clara," he said, his tone low, raw, a confession forced by her courtroom triumph. I'll make it right." Her eyes narrowed, her teeth grinding harder, the ache anchoring her against his words. She didn't trust him, not after his lies. His pill slipped into her tea, his plan to steal her patent for Klein's empire. But his next move stunned her. He leaned forward, his voice a whisper. "My firm's profits, they're yours. For clean water." The crowd gasped, the judge's gavel hovering, as Daniel's lawyer confirmed. Millions redirected to fund water initiatives. Clara's chest surged, Not with forgiveness, but with possibility, her fury cooling into resolve. She wouldn't take his money. She'd use it to save lives. Clara strode from the courtroom, Elena at her side, her steps deliberate, her scientist's mind already mapping her next move. She'd launched the Bennett Clean Water Initiative, distributing her patent's technology to communities choked by corporate pollution. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight a vow. She'd build something Daniel couldn't touch. At a Portland community center, she announced the initiative, her voice clear, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "This is for you," she said, her eyes locking onto Maya, the girl whose sketchbook held dreams of clean water. "For every town fighting for a future." The crowd roared, their hands clapping, their faces alight. But Clara's pulse spiked, Evelyn's spying eyes flashing in her memory, a reminder of the fight she'd endured. She moved to her new lab, a sunlit space she'd leased far from Daniel's sterile cage. Her hands steadied, signing contracts to send purification systems to rural towns, her scientist's precision guiding each step. Maya's mother, a single parent from a polluted district, approached, her voice trembling. "You saved us," she said, handing Clara a letter from her town, their water now clean. Clara's throat tightened, her fingers curling around the key, its rusted edges a reminder of her journey, from the T, the lock symbol, the video, to this moment of impact. "It's just the start," Clara said, her voice a blade, slicing through doubt. She wouldn't stop, not for Maya, not for the millions her patent could reach. Elena joined her eyes fierce. "You're changing the game," she said, her hand gripping Clara's shoulder, a spark of their old lab days. Tom Reed's text pinged, news of Klein's company collapsing under scrutiny, a ripple from Clara's victory. Her heart surged, her resolve iron as she thought of Daniel's donation, his attempt at redemption. She didn't care about his guilt. She cared about the lives it would save. At the lab, she pinned the letter from Maya's town to a board, next to her journal, its pages once filled with suspicions, now a record of triumph. "This is hope," she said, her voice low, addressing the team assembling her systems. "We build it together." Their nods were fuel, their hands moving with purpose, her patent no longer a target but a beacon. Clara's teeth ground, the ache a reminder of her fight as she signed another contract, her hands steady. Daniel's money would fund systems for a dozen towns, but her initiative was hers, born from her pain, her defiance. She thought of the community center, Maya's eager eyes, and vowed to mentor others, to give them the voice Daniel tried to silence. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight lighter now, a symbol of her unlocked strength. The lab buzzed, her team's energy a pulse, but Daniel's threat lingered, a faint shadow. Clara's gaze hardened, her scientist's mind plotting ahead. She'd protect her legacy, her purpose. The letter on the board fluttered, a quiet promise, whispering of the lives she'd touch, the hope she'd forge from the ashes of betrayal. "You can't erase me, Daniel," Clara whispered, her voice a fierce blade as she stood in her sunlit Portland lab, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until pain anchored her resolve. The tarnished key hung around her neck, its rusted edges pressing into her skin, a symbol of the lock she'd opened. Daniel's betrayal, exposed by the contract, the video of him poisoning her tea, and the hair sample proving tetrotoxin. The courtroom verdict had crushed him, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn, restoring Clara's water purification patent, while Daniel's donation of his firm's profits fueled her Bennett Clean Water Initiative. His final snarl, "This isn't over," echoed faintly, but Clara's heart pounded, a war drum, as she leaned over her drafting table, her scientist's mind blazing with purpose. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as she sketched a new purification system, her legacy for communities like Maya's, the girl whose dreams fueled her fight. Clara's pencil moved with precision, each line a vow to rebuild what Daniel tried to destroy. The lab buzzed, her team assembling systems for towns choking on corporate pollution, their hands moving with the same fire she felt. Maya, the 12-year-old from the community center, stood beside her, her sketchbook open, her pencil tracing a filtered design Clara had refined. "It'll work now," Maya said, her eyes bright, her voice a spark. Clara's chest surged, her throat tightening as she nodded. "You made it better," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the lab's hum. Maya's grin was a mirror of Clara's younger self, the scientist who dreamed big before Daniel's lies caged her. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight lighter now, a reminder of her journey, from the poison tea, the lock symbol, the video, to this moment of rebirth. Elena burst through the door, her eyes fierce, holding a letter from a rural Oregon town. "They've got clean water, Clara, because of you." She thrust the paper into Clara's hands, her grip a lifeline, their old lab days flashing in her nod. Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding as she read the words. A community of 500, free from polluted wells. Thanking her initiative. Her heart swelled, her fury cooling into purpose as she pinned the letter above her desk, next to her journal. Once a record of Daniel's betrayal, now a testament to her triumph. "This is why we fight," she said, her voice a blade slicing through doubt. The team cheered, their hands clapping, their faces alight, but Clara's mind flashed to Maya's mother, her gratitude in the courtroom, a spark that fueled her mission. Tom Reed's text pinged, his words sharp. "Klein's assets seized. You changed the game." Clara's lips curled, a silent snarl as she thought of Daniel's donation, his attempt at redemption. She didn't care about his guilt. She cared about the towns it would save. Her hands steadied, signing a contract to send systems to 5 more communities, her scientist's precision guiding each stroke. "For them," she said, her voice low, addressing Maya, who clutched her sketchbook, her eyes wide. "Your designs will do this too." Maya's nod was fierce, her pencil moving faster, and Clara's chest tightened, pride surging. She'd been Daniel's ghost, but now she was their beacon, her patent a lifeline for millions. The lab's energy pulsed, her team's hands assembling filters, but Daniel's threat lingered, a faint shadow. Clara's gaze hardened, her fingers brushing the key as she recalled Evelyn's spying eyes, Klein's greed, the warehouse ambush. She'd survived, but vigilance was her armor. She moved to a board, pinning Maya's sketch next to the letter, her voice clear. "Your voice is your strength," she told Maya, her words a vow, echoing her own fight. "Never let it be silenced." Maya's eyes brimmed, mirroring Clara's journey, and Clara's heart steadied, her resolve iron. She thought of the community center, her journal's suspicions, the key's promise, each a step to this moment, where her pain became purpose. A knock interrupted, and Elena led in a young scientist, Lila, her hands nervous around a prototype. I want to join," Lila said, her voice trembling but fierce. Clara's gaze softened, her scientist's mind seeing her younger self in Lila's fire. "Show me," she said, her voice a spark, guiding Lila to the table. They worked, Clara's hands steady, refining Lila's design, her words sharp. "Your ideas matter. Fight for them." Lila's nod was aflame, and Clara's chest surged, her legacy growing. The letter from the Oregon town pinned above was a testament, but Lila's prototype, Maya's sketch, her team's work, they were her new family, forged in the fire of her fight. Clara stepped back, her pencil hovering, as a bottle of ink tipped, spilling black across her sketch. Her breath hitched, the old panic flaring, Daniel's tea, the poison, the journal's lock symbol. But she stopped, her fingers tracing the spill, dipping her pencil into the mess. She wove the ink into her design, the dark streaks becoming pipes, channels, a symbol of scars transformed. Her teeth ground, the ache a vow as she finished the sketch, a purification system for a town like Maya's. "Pain builds strength," she said, her voice low, addressing her team, their nods fuel. Elena's eyes gleamed, her hand squeezing Clara's shoulder. "Your hope," she said, her words a spark. The lab's hum softened, Clara's gaze lingering on the letter. The key, Maya's sketch. Daniel's threat echoed, but it held no power. She'd burned her journal, its suspicions now ashes, replaced by this lab, this purpose. Lila's prototype hummed, Maya's pencil moved, and Clara's heart steadied, her scientist's mind plotting new systems, new lives. She stepped outside, the Portland skyline glowing, her hands steady as she held her pencil. No longer Daniel's tool, but hers. The moral burned clear. Your voice is your strength. Never let it be silenced. It tied her journey, Daniel's betrayal, Elena's loyalty, Maya's dreams, Lila's fire, into a legacy of hope. Clara returned to her desk, her fingers adding one final line to the sketch. A pipe wide and open for communities needing it. The lab's light spilled onto the street, a beacon in the dusk. She closed her sketchbook, her smile quiet but unshakable, her team around her, her new family forging a future. Daniel's voice, Klein's greed, Evelyn's betrayal. They were ghosts fading in her strength. She wasn't the woman who'd collapsed under poison, but Clara, architect of her future, her blueprint reclaimed. The key around her neck gleamed, a quiet vow, whispering of the lives she'd build, the hope she'd leave behind. Clara's journey teaches us that your voice is your strength. Never let it be silenced, no matter how deep the betrayal. Her fight from a poisoned cup to a reclaimed legacy shows the power of resilience and truth. What did Clara's defiance stir in you? A memory, a feeling, a fire of your own? Share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from, and what moment hit you hardest? Your story matters just like hers. Thank you for joining us through every twist and heartbeat of this tale. Your support lights our path, and we're so grateful. Stay tuned for more stories of courage and truth. We'll see you in the next chapter. Keep building your own blueprint. Get out of my sight. You don't belong here. Margaret Ellison's voice slices through the Grand Plaza's auction hall, sharp as a guillotine. Her sequined gown glints under the chandeliers, but it's her sneer that draws blood. Laura Bennett, 35, stands frozen, her beige silk dress clinging to her frame like a second skin. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding so hard her temples throb. Margaret, 48, a Manhattan art collector with a tongue sharper than her diamond earrings, steps closer, her heels clicking like a predator's claws. "What's that rag you're wearing? Thrift store clearance?" She spits, loud enough for every head to turn. Phones whip out, cameras flashing, capturing Laura's humiliation. Laura's fingers tighten around her clutch, knuckles whitening. "I'm here for the cause," she says, voice steady but low, like a taut wire. Margaret cuts her off. "Cause, please. You're a nobody playing dress-up in a room full of somebodies." The crowd murmurs, a venomous hum. Margaret's eyes rake over Laura's simple dress, her plain flats, her unadorned neck. "You think you can waltz into my world? Check her invite," she barks at a trembling staff member. The young man fumbles, approaching Laura with an apologetic glance. "Ma'am, may I see—" "No need," Laura snaps, her voice cutting through his hesitation. She pulls out a gold embossed card, holding it high. The staff member stammers, "Mrs. Bennett, you're cleared." Margaret's laugh is a jagged blade. "Cleared? She probably stole it." The accusation lands like a punch, and Laura's chest tightens, her breath shallow. She feels the weight of 100 eyes, judging, mocking, dissecting. A woman in a fur coat whispers to her companion, "Who let her in?" Another chuckles, "Lost tourist, maybe." The phones keep recording, their lenses like vultures circling a carcass. Laura's pulse hammers in her ears, but she squares her shoulders. "I don't need to prove myself to you," she says, her words a quiet defiance. Margaret steps closer, her perfume choking the air. "Oh, honey, you're proving exactly what you are. A cheap fraud." She snatches a glass of red wine from a passing tray, and with a flick of her wrist, splashes it across Laura's dress. The liquid stains the beige silk like blood, dripping onto the marble floor. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Laura's hands tremble, but she doesn't flinch. Her eyes lock onto Margaret's, burning with a fire that silences the room for a heartbeat. "You'll regret that," Laura says, her voice low, a promise wrapped in steel. Margaret smirks, tossing her hair. "Regret? I'm Margaret Ellison. I own this city's art scene. You're nothing." She turns to the crowd, raising her glass as if toasting her victory. "Someone get this trash out before she ruins the evening." The staff member hesitates, caught between Margaret's command and Laura's unyielding stance. Laura's fingers curl into fists, nails biting into her palms. She feels the sting of the wine soaking through her dress, cold against her skin, but it's the humiliation that burns hotter. Every whisper, Every stare, every click of a camera feels like a lash. A man in a tuxedo mutters, "She doesn't look like she belongs." Laura hears it and her heart lurches, but she refuses to break. She steps forward, closing the gap between her and Margaret. "You don't get to decide who belongs," she says, her voice rising just enough to carry. The crowd hushes, sensing a shift. Margaret's smirk falters for a split second, but she recovers, leaning in. "Keep talking, sweetheart. You're only digging your grave deeper." The words are a challenge, a dare to fight back in a world where Margaret holds all the cards, or so she thinks. Laura's lips part, ready to fire back, but a distant figure moves through the crowd, unnoticed by Margaret. The air crackles with tension, the promise of a reckoning just out of sight. Laura Bennett stands rooted to the marble floor of the Grand Plaza's auction hall, her beige silk dress dripping with Margaret Ellison's red wine. The stain spreads like a wound, but it's the weight of the crowd's stares that cuts deeper. Her fists clench, nails carving crescents into her palms. Margaret's smirk is a blade, slicing through the air as she waves off a staff member's hesitant approach. "Remove her!" Margaret snaps, her voice a whip crack. "She's ruining my evening." The crowd's murmurs swell, a chorus of judgment. Phones flash, capturing every second of Laura's humiliation. A woman in pearls hisses, "She's out of place." Another mutters, "Embarrassing." Laura's chest heaves, her breath sharp and ragged, but her eyes burn with defiance. She steps forward, closing the gap to Margaret, her flat silent against the marble. "You don't own this room," she says, her voice low, steady, a steel wire stretched taut. Margaret laughs, a harsh grating sound. "Own it? I am in this room. You're just dirt on my floor." She flicks her wrist, dismissing Laura like a servant. The staff member edges closer, his face pale, torn between duty and discomfort. "Ma'am, please," he mumbles, gesturing toward the exit. Laura's jaw tightens, teeth grinding until her temples pulse. She doesn't budge. "I'm here for the kids who need books, not your approval," she fires back, her words a quiet grenade. The crowd hushes, some leaning forward, caught by her resolve. Margaret's eyes narrow, her diamond earrings glinting as she leans in, voice dripping venom. "Kids, spare me the sob story. You're a fraud, and everyone sees it." She turns to the crowd, arms wide, playing to her audience. "Who let this nobody in? She's a disgrace." Laura's pulse thunders, her heart hammering against her ribs. The word nobody lands like a fist, echoing every doubt she's buried since marrying Daniel Harper. But she doesn't flinch. Her spine straightens, shoulders squaring like a soldier facing fire. "Call me what you want," she says, her voice rising, clear and unshaken. "But I'm not leaving, not because of you." The crowd shifts, whispers rippling like a stone dropped in water. A man in a tuxedo frowns, rethinking his judgment. A woman with a diamond choker hesitates, her phone lowering slightly. Margaret's face twists, her composure cracking. "You think you can talk back to me?" she hisses, stepping so close Laura can smell her floral perfume, sharp and suffocating. "I've built this city's art scene. You're nothing but a cheap dress and a stolen invite." Laura's hands tremble, but she holds Margaret's gaze unflinching. "My worth isn't in my dress," she says, her voice a blade of its own. "It's in what I do for others. Can you say the same?" The question hangs heavy, a challenge that silences the room for a heartbeat. The staff member freezes, unsure how to proceed. Margaret's smirk falters, her eyes darting to the crowd, seeking allies. But some faces now show doubt, others curiosity. Laura takes a step back, not in retreat, but with purpose. She grabs her clutch, stained with wine, and turns toward the exit, her movements deliberate, graceful. "You'll see who I am," she says, her voice low, prophetic, echoing in the hushed hall. The crowd parts as she walks, her head high, the red stain on her dress like a badge of defiance. Margaret scoffs, trying to reclaim control. "Good riddance," she calls, but her voice wavers, betraying a flicker of unease. As Laura reaches the grand doors, a man's silhouette looms in the shadows, watching her exit with an intensity that promises consequences. The crowd's whispers grow louder, phones still recording, unaware that the real storm is just beginning. Margaret Ellison stands triumphant in the Grand Plaza's auction hall, her sequin gown catching every light as the crowd's whispers fuel her ego. Laura Bennett's exit, her beige dress stained red with wine, feels like a victory. Margaret tosses her hair, diamond earrings flashing, and raises her glass to a nearby ally. "That's how you handle trash," she says, voice sharp as a shard of glass. But the words barely leave her lips when a woman in a velvet gown leans toward her companion, muttering, "Wasn't that Laura Bennett? Harper's wife?" Margaret's smile freezes, her grip on the glass tightening until her knuckles blanch. Her pulse quickens, a cold prickle crawling up her spine. She laughs, sharp and forced, brushing off the comment. "Harper, please, that nobody's not married to anyone important." But her eyes dart to the crowd, scanning for confirmation. A man in a pinstripe suit scrolls on his phone, his brow furrowing. "Look at this," he says, showing his wife a headline. "Daniel Harper, tech billionaire, spotted with wife Laura at charity gala." Margaret's stomach lurches, her breath catching like a hook in her throat. She snatches the phone, her manicured nails clicking against the screen. The photo shows Laura in that same understated style, beside a man whose quiet intensity screams power. Daniel Harper, billionaire, her victim's husband. Margaret's chest tightens, her heart pounding like a war drum. "No," she hisses, shoving the phone back. "She's a fraud, she has to be." But doubt creeps in, a venom seeping through her veins. She turns to a staff member, her voice low, urgent. "That woman, Laura, who cleared her invite?" The young man, still shaken from the confrontation, stammers, "Mrs. Bennett, VIP. Her name's on the platinum list." Margaret's eyes widen, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Platinum list, reserved for the elite, people with money, influence, power, people like Daniel Harper. The crowd's murmurs grow louder, a buzz of accusation. A woman in a sapphire necklace whispers, "Margaret went too far." Another says, "That was Harper's wife? She's done for." Margaret's head snaps toward them, her face flushing crimson. "Mind your own business," she snaps, but her voice cracks, betraying her panic. She smooths her gown, fingers trembling, trying to reclaim control, but the phones keep flashing, their lenses catching every flicker of fear in her eyes. The video of her splashing wine on Laura is already spreading, a digital wildfire she can't contain. She spins toward the exit, her heels clicking furiously, determined to find Laura and fix this before it spirals. But a glint on the floor stops her cold. A pearl earring, delicate and out of place, lies near where Laura stood. Margaret bends down, her fingers brushing the cool gem. It's not hers, it's too simple, too modest, like Laura. Her mind races. Did Laura drop it? Why does it feel significant? She pockets it, her hand shaking, a strange unease settling in her gut. It's just an earring, she tells herself, but the weight of it feels like a warning. "Mrs. Ellison," a voice cuts through her thoughts. A staff supervisor, stern-faced, approaches. "We need to discuss the incident. The board's already getting calls." Margaret's jaw drops, her voice a hiss. "Calls? From who?" The supervisor's eyes are cold. "Important people. They saw the video. They're not happy." Margaret's knees weaken, her hand clutching a nearby chair for support. The room spins, the crowd's whispers now a roar in her ears. She sees a man in the corner, his silhouette familiar, watching her with an intensity that chills her blood. Is that Harper? Her throat tightens, her breath shallow. She forces a smile, her voice brittle. "It was a misunderstanding. I'll handle it." But her words sound hollow, even to her. The crowd's eyes bore into her, no longer admiring but judging. The pearl earring burns in her pocket, a tiny anchor pulling her toward a truth she's not ready to face. She takes a step toward the exit, her heart racing, knowing the real cost of her disgraceful move is just beginning to unfold. "You've made a mess, Margaret, and I won't clean it up." Richard Klein's voice snarls through the phone, his words a whip cracking across Margaret Ellison's pride. Her fingers clutch the pearl earring in her pocket, its smooth surface a cold reminder of her mistake. She stands in the Grand Plaza's bustling lobby, her sequined gown now feeling like armor too heavy to bear. Her pulse races, a drumbeat of panic. The video of her splashing wine on Laura Bennett is everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, gossip blogs. Comments flood in. Disgusting snob. Who does she think she is? Her chest tightens, her breath shallow as she scans the crowd for Laura. She needs to fix this. Now. Margaret shoves past a group of tuxedoed men, her heels clicking like gunfire. "Where is she?" she mutters, her voice a low growl. She corners a staff member, a nervous girl with a clipboard. "Laura Bennett. Where'd she go?" The girl flinches, stammering. "She left, ma'am. Headed toward Brooklyn, I think." Brooklyn. The word hits like a slap. Margaret's lip curls, but her stomach twists. Brooklyn means Laura's not hiding in some penthouse. She's gone back to her roots. That realization stings, a needle in Margaret's pride. She storms out, hailing a cab with a sharp wave. "Brooklyn, fast!" The driver nods, peeling into traffic. Margaret's phone buzzes, another notification, a news alert. Art collector Margaret Ellison faces backlash for public humiliation at auction. Her fingers tremble, nearly dropping the phone. She scrolls, her eyes burning. The video has 200,000 views. Her name trends with hashtags under an Ellison shame or an art world snob. Her throat closes, her breath a ragged gasp. She dials her assistant, voice clipped. "Find Laura Bennett, now. I need her address." The cab weaves through Manhattan's chaos, but Margaret's mind is louder. She sees Laura's face, those steady eyes, that defiant stance. "You'll see who I am," Laura had said. The words echo, a taunt. Margaret's nails dig into her palms, drawing blood. She's not sorry. Not really. But she knows Daniel Harper's power. A billionaire like him could crush her career, her connections, her life. She needs to find Laura. Spin this, make it right before he does worse. Her hand brushes the pearl earring again, its weight heavier than before. Why does it matter? She shakes the thought, focusing on survival. In Brooklyn, the cab pulls up to a community center, its sign faded but proud. Bright Futures Education Hub. Margaret steps out, her gown absurd against the gritty sidewalk. She pushes through the door, her eyes scanning the room. Kids laugh, scribbling in notebooks. Volunteers bustle, but no Laura. Margaret's chest heaves, frustration boiling. She grabs a volunteer, a wiry man with glasses. "Laura Bennett, is she here?" He frowns, protective. "Who's asking?" Margaret's temper flares. "Margaret Ellison. Tell me where she is." The man's eyes narrow, recognizing her name. "You're the one from the video," he says, voice cold. "She's not here for you to bully again." Margaret's face burns, her pulse hammering. "This is a misunderstanding," she snaps, but her voice wavers. The volunteer points to the door. "Leave, now!" The rejection stings, a public slap of its own. She steps back, her heels unsteady. Outside, her phone buzzes again, a text from Richard Klein. "Fix this, or the board pulls your funding." Her heart lurches, her breath catching. She's losing control, her empire crumbling with every retweet. The crowd outside the center grows, some pointing, whispering. "That's her," one says, phone raised. Margaret's hands shake, her composure fracturing. She dials her assistant again, voice a hiss. "Get me her exact address. I don't care how." As she waits, her eyes catch a poster on the center's wall. Laura Bennett, Volunteer of the Year. The photo shows Laura smiling, surrounded by kids. Margaret's stomach churns, a mix of rage and dread. She's not just a nobody. She's someone who matters. The realization hits like a fist, but Margaret shoves it down. She'll find Laura, say whatever it takes, and bury the scandal. But the pearl earring in her pocket feels like a ticking bomb, whispering of secrets she can't yet grasp. "You're stronger than her, Laura. Don't let her win." Daniel Harper's voice cuts through the hum of the Bright Futures Education Hub in Brooklyn, his hand gripping Laura Bennett's tightly. Her beige dress, still stained with Margaret Ellison's red wine, clings to her frame, a badge of the humiliation she endured hours ago at the Grand Plaza. Laura's jaw clenches, her teeth grinding as she kneels beside a young girl, helping her sound out a word in a tattered book. Her eyes burn, not with tears, but with a fire that refuses to flicker out. The community center buzzes with kids' laughter, volunteers chatter, and the scratch of pencils. But Laura's heart pounds, replaying Margaret's venom. "You're a nobody playing dress-up." She rises, brushing her hands on her dress, the wine stain stark against the beige silk. "I'm not running, Daniel," she says, her voice low, steady, a blade honed by resolve. Daniel, 42, a tech billionaire with eyes that see through walls, nods, his suit jacket slung over a chair, sleeves rolled up. "I know," he says, his tone fierce with pride. "You never do." He steps closer, his hand brushing her cheek, gentle but firm. "That video's everywhere. She's crumbling already." Laura's lips twitch, a half smile breaking through. "Good," she says, her voice sharp. "Let her feel it." A boy tugs at Laura's sleeve, holding up a drawing. "Miss Laura, look!" His grin is wide, gap-toothed, oblivious to her turmoil. She kneels again, her fingers steady as she praises his work. "This is amazing, Jamal," she says, her voice warm, masking the storm inside. Her chest tightens, the weight of Margaret's words, fraud, nobody, still clawing at her. But these kids, this place ground her. She's been here for years, teaching, mentoring, giving everything to kids who have nothing. This is her world, not Margaret's glittering cage. Daniel watches, his gaze intense, protective. "You're why I started the AI project," he says, voice low, cutting through the room's noise. "Your heart, your fight, it's changing lives." Laura's breath catches, her fingers pausing on the book. She looks up, meeting his eyes, seeing the truth in them. She's not just his wife, she's his partner, his muse. The thought steadies her, but doubt lingers. "They'll always see me as an outsider," she says, her voice a whisper, raw. "No matter what I do." Daniel's jaw tightens, his hand squeezing hers. "They're wrong, and they'll learn." His phone buzzes, a message from his team. Ellison's scrambling. The board's furious. Laura's eyes narrow, a spark igniting. "She's coming for me, isn't she?" she says, not a question, but a certainty. Daniel nods. "She's desperate. Let her come." Laura's lips press into a line, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. She won't hide. Not here. Not anywhere. A volunteer, a wiry woman with a clipboard, approaches. "Laura, you okay?" she asks, glancing at the wine stain. Laura nods, her chin lifting. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just another day." But her hands tremble slightly, betraying the effort to stay composed. She moves to a table, helping another child with a math problem, her voice calm but her pulse racing. The center is her sanctuary, but Margaret's attack has breached its walls. She feels exposed, vulnerable, yet unbroken. Daniel's phone buzzes again. A notification. Ellison spotted outside. Laura's head snaps up, her eyes locking with his. "She's here," she says, her voice a low growl. Her fingers curl into fists, nails biting into her palms. She's not ready to forgive, not yet. But she's ready to fight. As she helps a child pack up, her hand brushes a stack of papers, dislodging a faded letter tucked beneath. It falls to the floor, its seal broken, the word Ellison scrawled in old ink. Laura freezes, her breath hitching. Something's coming, something bigger than Margaret's cruelty. "I'm sorry, all right? Let's end this circus." Margaret Ellison's voice cracks like a snapped wire as she bursts into the Bright Futures education hub, her sequined gown glaringly out of place among the worn tables and children's drawings. Laura Bennett freezes, her hand clutching the faded letter she just found. The word Ellison scrawled on it like a warning. Her pulse hammers, her jaw tightening until her teeth ache. Margaret's diamond earrings flash as she strides forward, heels stabbing the linoleum floor. "You've made your point," Margaret hisses, her face flushed, eyes darting to avoid the curious stares of volunteers. "That video's ruining me. Name your price." Laura's fingers tighten around the letter, her knuckles whitening. She rises from the table where she was helping a child, her wine-stained beige dress a silent accusation. Price? She says, her voice low, sharp as a blade. You think you can buy your way out of this? Margaret's lips twist, her composure fraying. Don't play noble, she snaps, cutting Laura off before she can continue. Everyone has a price. Tell me yours, and this ends now. The words are a slap, but Laura's eyes burn, unyielding. She steps forward, closing the gap, her breath steady despite the storm in her chest. Daniel Harper, standing nearby, folds his arms, his gaze cold as steel. You don't get to dictate terms, he says, his voice a low growl. Margaret flinches, her eyes flicking to him, recognizing the billionaire's quiet menace. Mr. Harper, she stammers, her hands trembling. This was a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was your wife. Laura's lip curls, her voice slicing through. That's your excuse? You humiliated me because I didn't look like I belonged? The room quiets, volunteers pausing, kids glancing up. Margaret's face reddens, her fingers clutching her purse. I was wrong, she says, voice brittle, forced. I'm sorry. Laura's chest tightens, the apology ringing hollow. Sorry doesn't erase what you did, she says, her words deliberate, each one a hammer strike. You mocked me, shamed me, because you thought I was nothing. You don't get to walk away clean. Margaret's eyes narrow, her pride clawing back. What do you want then? To ruin me? Laura's gaze doesn't waver. I want you to learn, she says, her voice rising firm. Volunteer here. 6 months. Teach these kids. See what it means to care about something bigger than your ego. The demand lands like a grenade, and Margaret's jaw drops, her breath catching. Volunteer? Margaret chokes out, her voice a mix of disbelief and scorn. Here? With these people? The insult stings and a volunteer nearby gasps, her hand tightening on a stack of books. Laura's fists clench, nails biting into her palms. Yes, here, she says, her voice a quiet inferno. Or I let Daniel's lawyers tear your world apart. Daniel steps closer, his presence a wall of authority. Choose fast, Mrs. Ellison, he says, his tone icy. My team's already drafting the papers. Margaret's eyes dart between them, her face paling as the weight of her mistake crashes down. She nods, a jerky, reluctant motion. Fine. 6 months, she mutters, her voice barely audible, her pride shattered. Laura's shoulders relax slightly, but her eyes remain sharp, watchful. She glances at the letter in her hand, its edges worn, the Ellison name glaring. What's this? She asks, holding it up. Margaret's eyes widen, a flicker of panic crossing her face. Nothing, she says too quickly, her hand twitching as if to snatch it. Laura pulls it back, her instincts flaring. It's got your name on it, she says, her voice low, probing. Margaret's lips part, but no words come. Her face is a mask of fear. Daniel's eyes narrow, sensing the shift. What are you hiding? He asks, his voice a blade. Margaret shakes her head, her hands trembling. It's just old business, she stammers, but her eyes betray her, darting to the door. Laura tucks the letter into her clutch, her pulse quickening. We'll find out, she says, her words a promise, heavy with intent. The room feels charged, the air thick with unspoken secrets. Margaret backs away, her heels unsteady, her empire teetering on the edge of a cliff she can't see. Keep your mouth shut or you'll regret it. Richard Klein's voice snarls through the phone, a venomous hiss that makes Laura Bennett's blood run cold. She stands in the cluttered office of the Bright Futures Education Hub in Brooklyn, her fingers gripping the faded letter with Ellison scrawled across it. Her pulse pounds, her jaw clenching until her teeth ache. The letter found moments ago after Margaret's forced apology feels like a live wire in her hand. Richard, 50, the steely-eyed manager of Margaret Ellison's prestigious Manhattan Museum, isn't just angry. He's dangerous. His threat slices through the line, a blade aimed at Laura's resolve. You don't scare me, Laura snaps, her voice sharp, unwavering, despite the tremor in her hands. Richard's laugh is cold, jagged. You're playing with fire, Mrs. Bennett. Drop that letter. Forget what you saw. He cuts her off before she can respond, his words a barrage. You think you're safe because of Harper? Money doesn't protect you from me. Laura's chest tightens, her breath shallow. She glances at Daniel Harper, who stands nearby, his fists clenched, eyes blazing with fury. "Who's this?" Daniel demands, snatching the phone. Richard's voice doesn't falter. "Tell your wife to back off, Harper, or I'll bury you both." Laura's fingers curl tighter around the letter, nails biting into her palms. The memory of Margaret's wine splashing her dress fuels her defiance. "We're not backing down," she says, her voice a low growl, stealing the phone back. Richard's tone turns icy. "You're digging your own grave. That letter's nothing. You're nothing." The words echo Margaret's earlier taunts. But Laura's spine stiffens, her resolve hardening like steel. "Then why are you so scared?" She fires back, her words a dart hitting its mark. Richard pauses, a beat of silence that screams guilt. Daniel's hand lands on her shoulder, his grip firm, protective. "We're coming for you," he says into the phone, his voice a quiet storm. Richard scoffs, but it's strained. "Try it. You'll crash and burn." The call ends with a click, leaving Laura's pulse hammering in her ears. She looks at the letter, its worn edges taunting her. It mentions a fund tied to Margaret's museum, with Richard's initials scrawled in the margin. Her gut twists, sensing a deeper rot. "He's hiding something," she says, her voice low, certain. Daniel nods, his jaw tight. "We'll find it." A volunteer bursts in, her face pale. "Laura, someone's outside, asking for you." Laura's heart lurches, her fingers tightening on the letter. She steps to the window, peering through the blinds. A man in a dark suit lingers across the street, his eyes locked on the center. Richard's man. Her breath catches, her fists clenching. "He's watching us," she says, her voice a hiss. Daniel's eyes narrow, his body tensing like a coiled spring. "Let him watch. We're not hiding." Laura turns back to the letter, her mind racing. Richard's threat wasn't just about her. It was about protecting something bigger. The museum. The fund. Her humiliation at the auction feels like a spark in a much larger fire. She tucks the letter into her clutch, her hands steady now, fueled by purpose. "We need answers," she says, her voice cutting through the room's tension. The volunteer hesitates, glancing at the door. "Be careful," she says, her voice trembling. Laura nods, her chin lifting. She's not the same woman who stood frozen under Margaret's wine. She's a fighter now. Daniel grabs his jacket, his movements sharp, decisive. "I'm calling Anna," he says, referring to Laura's journalist friend. "We're digging into this. Tonight." Laura's eyes meet his, a silent pact forming. Richard's threat hangs heavy, but it's only stoked their fire. As they step toward the door, the man outside vanishes into the shadows, leaving behind a chill that promises trouble. "You're in over your head, Laura. Walk away." Richard Klein's threat echoes in Laura Bennett's mind as she huddles over a cluttered desk in Anna's cramped Brooklyn apartment. The faded letter with Ellison scrawled on it spread out before her. Her pulse pounds, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth throb. The letter, found at the Bright Futures Education Hub, mentions a fund tied to Margaret Ellison's museum and bears Richard's initials. Laura's fingers tremble, not from fear, but from a fire igniting in her gut. She's done being the victim. Margaret's wine-soaked humiliation at the Grand Plaza auction was just the beginning. This letter points to something darker, something worth Richard's menacing call. Anna, 45, a wiry journalist with eyes sharp as razors, slams a laptop onto the desk. "This fund's a ghost," she says, her voice clipped, urgent. "No public records, no filings. It's buried deep." Laura's lips press into a line, her nails biting into her palms. "Then we dig deeper," she says, her voice a low growl, steady despite the storm in her chest. Daniel Harper, her billionaire husband, leans against the wall, his rolled-up sleeves revealing forearms tense like steel cables. "Richard's scared," he says, his tone cold, calculated. "He's protecting something big. We need proof." Laura's eyes scan the letter again, its cryptic lines burning into her mind. Ellison Fund, Art Acquisition, RK Oversight. Her breath catches, her instincts screaming. "Art acquisition," she mutters. "The museum's been buying record-breaking pieces. What if they're not real?" Anna's head snaps up, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Fakes? She says, her voice sharp. That's a billion-dollar scam if true. Daniel's eyes narrow, his jaw tightening. Richard's running it, he says. Margaret's just the face. Laura's heart races, her mind piecing together fragments. The pearl earring she lost at the auction, found by Margaret, nags at her. She pulls it from her clutch, its simplicity stark against the chaos. This, she says, holding it up. It's from a painting I saw at the museum. A portrait. Stolen 10 years ago. Anna's eyes widen, her fingers pausing. Stolen? That's a lead. She pulls up an old article. Priceless Renaissance portrait vanished. Pearl earring key clue. Laura's pulse hammers, her breath shallow. It's connected, she says, her voice a blade. The fund's laundering money through fake art. Daniel's phone buzzes. A message from his tech team. Museum server access granted. He grins, a predator's smile. We're in, he says, plugging a USB drive into Anna's laptop. Lines of code flash across the screen, revealing encrypted files labeled Ellison Fund Transactions. Laura's fingers itch to dive in, but Anna's hand shoots up. Slow down, she says. This is locked tight. We need a physical key, something at the museum. Laura's eyes flash, her resolve hardening. Then we go there, she says, her voice unwavering. Tonight. They move fast, piling into Daniel's sleek black SUV, the city's neon lights a blur outside. Laura's hands clench, her nails digging deeper, the letter and earring burning holes in her clutch. At the museum, a looming glass structure in Manhattan, they slip past a sleeping guard, Anna's press badge their flimsy cover. The air feels charged, every step a gamble. Laura's heart thumps, her senses razor sharp. They reach Richard's office, its door locked, but Daniel's tech skills bypass the keypad in seconds. Inside, files are stacked high, but Laura's eyes lock on a safe in the corner. There, she says, pointing, her voice a hiss. Anna kneels, her lock-picking tools glinting. Keep watch, she snaps. Laura stands guard, her pulse roaring, every creak in the building spiking her adrenaline. Daniel scans the desk, pulling out a ledger marked EF Acquisitions. Look at this, he says, his voice low, urgent. Payments to offshore accounts. Millions. For paintings never displayed. Laura's breath catches, her mind racing. Fakes, she says, her voice a quiet thunder. They're selling fakes, pocketing the cash. The safe clicks open, revealing a folder labeled Pearl Project. Laura snatches it, her hands steady despite her pounding heart. Inside, photos of the stolen portrait, invoices, and a list of buyers, names tied to Richard and Margaret. Her jaw tightens, her teeth grinding. This is it, she says, her voice a blade slicing through the silence. But a shadow moves outside the door, heavy footsteps echoing. Laura's head snaps up, her breath freezing. Someone's coming, she whispers, her voice a warning. Anna shoves the folder into her bag, her movement swift. Daniel grabs Laura's arm, his grip firm. We're not done, he says, his voice a low growl. They slip into a side hallway, hearts pounding as the footsteps grow louder. Laura clutches the pearl earring, its weight a tether to the truth. Richard's voice cuts through the darkness, barking orders to a guard. Find them. Now. Laura's resolve hardens, her fists clenching. They've got evidence, but they're not safe yet. The hunt is on, and the stakes just skyrocketed. Richard's been playing us all. Laura Bennett's voice is a hushed blade, cutting through the dim hallway of the Manhattan Museum. Her fingers clutch the Pearl Project folder, its pages trembling in her grip as she crouches behind a display case with Daniel Harper and Anna. Her pulse slams against her ribs, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth pulse with pain. The folder, snatched from Richard Klein's safe, holds photos of a stolen Renaissance portrait, fake invoices, and a list of buyers, evidence of a decade-long scam. Footsteps echo closer, Richard's voice barking orders to a guard. They're here, find them. Laura's breath catches, her nails digging into her palms, but her eyes burn with purpose. She flips open the folder, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. Look at this, she whispers, pointing to a transaction dated 10 years ago. The pearl earring. It's from the stolen portrait. They've been forging it, selling fakes to collectors. Daniel's eyes narrow, his jaw tightening like a coiled spring. "And laundering the money through Margaret's fund," he says, his voice a low growl. Anna, her face pale but fierce, scans a page. "Millions," she hisses. "They've defrauded half the art world." Laura's heart lurches, the weight of the truth crashing down. Her mind races, connecting dots. Margaret Ellison's name is on every invoice, but Richard's initials dominate the ledger. "She's a puppet," Laura says, her voice sharp, certain. "Richard's the mastermind. He used her museum to clean dirty money." Anna's lips press into a line, her fingers gripping the folder. "He's been hiding behind her status," she says, her voice ablade. "She didn't even know the full scheme." Laura's chest tightens, a mix of fury and pity. Margaret's cruelty at the auction was vile, but she's a pawn in a bigger game. Daniel's hand brushes Laura's, his touch grounding her. "We've got him," he says, his voice steady, lethal. "This ends tonight." But the footsteps grow louder, boots stomping closer. Laura's pulse roars, her breath shallow. She shoves the folder into Anna's bag, her movement swift, precise. "We need to get this out," she says, her voice a quiet command. Anna nods, her eyes flashing. "I'll call my editor. This hits the press tomorrow." Laura's resolve hardens, her fist clenching. She's not just fighting for herself now. She's exposing a criminal empire. A guard's flashlight beam cuts through the hallway, grazing the display case. Laura's heart skips, her body tensing. "Move," Daniel whispers, pulling her toward a stairwell. They slip through, the folder's weight a ticking bomb in Anna's bag. Laura's mind flashes to Margaret's panicked face at the community center, her denial about the letter. "She knew something," Laura says, her voice low, fierce. "Not everything, but enough." The truth is a knife, slicing through Margaret's facade and Richard's control. As they reach the stairwell, Richard's voice booms behind them. "You can't hide, Bennett." The threat sends a jolt through Laura, but her lips curl, defiance surging. "We're not hiding," she mutters, her voice a vow. The folder in Anna's bag holds the key to Richard's downfall, and Laura's ready to turn it. The stairwell door slams shut behind them, the sound echoing like a gunshot, promising a reckoning just steps away. "You're a dead woman, Bennett." Richard Klein's voice roars through the museum storage room, a cavern of shadows and crates where Laura Bennett stands trapped. Her pulse slams against her ribs, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth pulse with pain. The Pearl Project folder, clutched in her trembling hands, burns with the weight of Richard's decade-long scam. Fake art, laundered millions, and Margaret Ellison's unwitting complicity. Laura's breath catches, her nails digging into her palms as Richard, 50, his face twisted with rage, blocks the only exit. His dark suit blends into the gloom, but his eyes glint like a predator's, locked on her. "You should have walked away," he snarls, stepping closer, a crowbar gripped in his fist. Laura's heart lurches, her body tensing, but her voice cuts through, sharp as a blade. "You're the one who's done, Richard. This folder ends you." He laughs, a jagged sound, cutting her off. "You think you can expose me? A nobody like you?" The words echo Margaret's taunts from the auction, but Laura's spine stiffens, her resolve steel. She backs against a crate, her fingers tightening on the folder, her only weapon. "I'm not a nobody," she says, her voice low, defiant. "And you're not untouchable." Richard lunges, the crowbar swinging. Laura ducks, her reflexes sharp, the metal grazing her shoulder with a sting that jolts her. She stumbles, her wine-stained beige dress catching on a crate's edge, tearing. Her pulse roars, her breath shallow, but she scrambles upright, clutching the folder. "Daniel!" she shouts, praying her husband and Anna are close. Richard's hand clamps her wrist, wrenching it back. "No one's coming," he hisses, his breath hot on her face. "Give me the folder. Now!" Laura's free hand swings, her nails raking his cheek, drawing blood. He curses, staggering back, the crowbar clattering to the floor. Her chest heaves, adrenaline flooding her veins. She bolts for the door, but Richard recovers, grabbing her arm, slamming her against a crate. Pain explodes in her back, her vision blurring, but her grip on the folder holds. "You're nothing," he spits, his fingers digging into her arm. "Just like Margaret said." Laura's eyes blaze, her voice a growl. She was wrong. So are you. She kicks his shin hard, breaking free. Her feet pound the concrete, her breath ragged, as she dives behind another crate, heart hammering. Outside, Daniel's voice booms, desperate. Laura, where are you? Richard freezes, his head snapping toward the sound. Laura's lips curl, a spark of hope igniting. She clutches the folder tighter, her nails biting deeper, the evidence her lifeline. Here, she yells, her voice echoing through the storage room. Richard's face twists, panic flashing in his eyes. He grabs the crowbar, charging toward her hiding spot. Laura's pulse spikes, her body coiling like a spring. She dodges, the crowbar smashing into a crate, splintering wood. Shards fly, one slicing her cheek, warm blood trickling down. She scrambles through the maze of crates, her breath burning, the folder slipping in her sweaty grip. Richard's footsteps pound behind her, his curses a relentless drumbeat. You can't run forever, he roars, his voice a thunderclap. Laura's mind races, her heart pounding with every step. She spots a fire exit, its red glow a beacon. Her hand slams the handle, but it's locked. Her stomach drops, her breath freezing. Richard's shadow looms, the crowbar raised. Last chance, he says, his voice a venomous hiss. Laura's eyes dart, spotting a metal pipe on the floor. She grabs it, her hand steady despite the fear clawing her chest. You're finished, Richard, she says, her voice a blade, unwavering. She swings the pipe, not to strike, but to distract, forcing him back. The folder slips, landing near his feet. Her heart stops, but she dives for it, fingers brushing its edge as Richard lunges. Their hands collide, a desperate struggle, the folder caught between them. The door behind Richard bursts open, Daniel's silhouette charging in, a promise of salvation in a world gone mad. You're done, Klein! Daniel Harper's roar shatters the chaos of the museum's storage room, his fist slamming into Richard Klein's jaw, with a crack that echoes off the crates. Laura Bennett scrambles to her feet, her pulse hammering, her fingers clutching the Pearl Project folder as if it's her lifeline. Her beige dress, torn and stained with wine and blood, clings to her sweat-soaked skin. Her cheek stings from a splinter's cut, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth throb. Richard staggers, the crowbar slipping from his grip, his face a mask of rage and fear. Laura's breath burns, her eyes blazing with defiance. She's not running anymore. Daniel, his suit disheveled, grabs Richard's collar, pinning him against a crate. You touched my wife, he growls, his voice a low, lethal blade. Richard's lips curl, blood trickling from his split cheek. You've got nothing, he spits, his voice a desperate snarl. That folder's useless without the key. Laura's heart lurches, her fingers tightening on the folder. The key. Her mind flashes to the pearl earring, still in her clutch, its weight a nagging mystery. He's lying, she says, her voice sharp, cutting through the tension. He's scared. Anna, her journalist friend, bursts through the fire exit, her eyes wild, a USB drive in her hand. I cracked the server, she says, her voice clipped, urgent. But we need the master ledger. It's physical, hidden here. Laura's pulse spikes, her mind racing. The folder lists transactions, but the ledger, Richard's real record, holds the final nail for his coffin. She scans the room, her eyes locking on a locked cabinet in the corner, its steel glinting like a challenge. There, she says, pointing, her voice a command. Daniel shoves Richard harder, his knuckles whitening. Where's the key? He demands, his tone ice cold. Richard laughs, a jagged, desperate sound. You'll never find it, he says, his eyes darting to Laura, taunting. You're still a nobody, playing hero. The words sting, echoing Margaret's cruelty, but Laura's resolve hardens, her fist clenching. Keep talking, she says, her voice a blade. It's your grave. She dives for the cabinet, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. Anna joins her, pulling a lockpick from her pocket, her movements swift, precise. Cover us, Anna snaps, her fingers working the lock. Daniel wrestles Richard to the ground, his knee pinning the man's chest. Richard thrashes, cursing, but Daniel's grip is iron. Stay down, he growls, his voice a thunderclap. Laura's heart pounds, her nails biting into her palms as she guards Anna's back. The storage room feels like a cage, every creak spiking her adrenaline. Anna's lockpick clicks, the cabinet swinging open. Inside, a leather-bound ledger sits, its cover marked EF Final Accounts. Laura snatches it, her hands trembling but sure. "Got it," she says, her voice a quiet triumph. She flips it open, her eyes scanning pages of transactions. Millions laundered through fake art, names of elite buyers, offshore accounts. Richard's initials are everywhere. Margaret's name a mere footnote. "It's all here," Laura says, her voice rising, fierce. "Every deal, every lie." Anna's eyes flash, her fingers pulling out her phone to snap photos. "This'll bury him," she says, her voice a hiss of victory. But Richard's laugh cuts through, chilling. "You think that's enough?" he says, his voice strained under Daniel's knee. "My partners will crush you." Laura's blood runs cold, her breath catching. Partners. The word hits like a punch, hinting at a network beyond Richard. She clutches the ledger tighter, her mind racing. The pearl earring in her clutch feels heavier, its connection to the stolen portrait screaming for answers. "Who's protecting you?" she demands, stepping closer, her voice a blade. Richard's eyes narrow, his lips sealed, but his silence betrays fear. Daniel presses harder, his voice a growl. "Talk, or I break you." Richard's face twists, but he says nothing, his defiance crumbling under the weight of their evidence. Anna's phone pings, a message from her editor. "Press conference tomorrow. Send everything." Laura's heart leaps, her resolve steel. "We're ending this," she says, her voice unwavering. But a guard's shout echoes from the hallway, boots stomping closer. Laura's pulse roars, her body tensing. "Go!" Daniel says, hauling Richard up, his grip unrelenting. They bolt for the fire exit, Laura clutching the ledger, Anna with the folder. The guard's flashlight beam grazes them, a near miss. Laura's legs burn, her breath ragged, but her eyes blaze with purpose. They've got the truth, but the fight's not over. Richard's partners are out there, and they're coming. "You're finished, Klein!" Laura Bennett's voice slices through the packed press conference at the Manhattan Museum, her hands gripping the Pearl Project folder and the master ledger like twin grenades. Her pulse hammers, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth throb. The wine-stained, torn beige dress a battle scar from her clash with Richard Klein. Cameras flash, reporters lean forward, their pens scratching furiously. Laura stands at the podium, Daniel Harper by her side, his eyes blazing with unyielding support. Richard, handcuffed and flanked by security, glares from the side, his face a mask of fury and defeat. The air crackles, every word a spark ready to ignite. "You built an empire on lies," Laura says, her voice sharp, unwavering, cutting through the room's buzz. She holds up the ledger, its pages damning. Fake art, laundered millions, stolen dreams. Reporters gasp, phones recording every syllable. Richard lunges forward, his cuffs clinking, but security yanks him back. "Lies!" he roars, his voice a desperate snarl. "She's a fraud, a nobody." The words echo Margaret Ellison's taunts from the auction, but Laura's spine stiffens, her resolve steel. "A nobody," she fires back, her voice a blade. "I'm the one holding your secrets." She slams the ledger open, revealing transactions, millions funneled through fake paintings, offshore accounts, elite buyers. "You used Margaret's museum to wash your dirty money," Laura says, her voice rising, a quiet thunder. She points to the Pearl Project folder. "This ties you to a stolen Renaissance portrait, sold as a fake for a fortune." The crowd erupts, reporters shouting questions. Anna, Laura's journalist friend, steps forward, her phone flashing photos of the evidence. "It's airtight," Anna says, her voice clipped, fierce. "Names, dates, accounts. You're done." Richard's face pales, his lips trembling. "You can't prove intent," he spits, his voice cracking. Laura's eyes narrow, her nails biting into her palms. "We don't need to," she says, her voice a hiss. "Your ledger does." She turns to the crowd, holding up the pearl earring from her clutch. "This was the clue," she says, her voice steady, commanding. "It led us to your scam. You thought you could bury me, but I buried you." The room hushes. the earring glinting like a verdict. Margaret Ellison, standing in the back, her sequined gown replaced by a plain suit, steps forward. Her face is ashen, her hands trembling. "I didn't know," she says, her voice breaking, a shadow of her former arrogance. "Richard used me." Laura's gaze locks on her, pity mixing with steel. "You mocked me because I didn't fit your world," Laura says, her voice cutting. "But you were his pawn." Margaret's shoulders slump, her eyes dropping. "I'm sorry," she whispers, the words raw, real. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, others skeptical. Daniel steps up, his presence a wall of authority. "This ends now," he says, his voice a low growl. "The police have everything. The buyers are talking." Richard's head snaps up, panic flashing in his eyes. "You'll pay for this," he hisses, but his voice is weak, a dying ember. Security drags him away, his curses fading as the crowd's roar swallows them. Reporters swarm Laura, questions flying, but she stands tall, her chin lifted, the folder and ledger her shield and sword. Anna's editor, a grizzled man in a cheap suit, nods from the front row. "This hits the front page tomorrow," he says, his voice gruff, approving. Laura's chest swells, her breath steadying. She's not the humiliated woman from the auction anymore. She's a force, exposing a criminal empire. But her eyes flicker to Margaret, who lingers, broken but watching. A new fight looms, Margaret's redemption or her final fall. "Your empire's ashes, Klein!" Laura Bennett's voice cuts like a blade through the courtroom's tense silence. Her eyes locked on Richard Klein as he stands, handcuffed, his face a mask of defeated rage. Her pulse pounds, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. The torn, wine-stained beige dress, swapped for a simple black blazer that screams defiance. The Pearl Project folder and master ledger, now evidence, sit on the prosecutor's table, their pages sealing Richard's fate. Laura's fingers curl, nails biting into her palms as the judge's gavel slams down. "Guilty," the judge declares, voice a thunderclap. "Fraud, money laundering, 7 years." Richard's shoulders slump, his snarl fading to a whimper. "You'll pay," he hisses, but security yanks him back, his cuffs clinking. Laura's lips curl, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She turns to Daniel Harper, her husband, whose hand grips hers, his knuckles white with pride. "It's over," he says, his voice low, steady. Laura nods, her chest heaving, but her heart still races. The courtroom buzzes, reporters scribbling, cameras flashing. Margaret Ellison, in the back row, her face pale, her once sequined glory replaced by a plain coat, shrinks under the weight of her complicity. "Margaret's next," Laura says, her voice a quiet vow. The judge addresses her, voice stern. "Mrs. Ellison, community service, 6 months for aiding fraud." Margaret's head bows, her hands trembling, but she nods, accepting the sentence. Laura's eyes soften, pity mixing with steel. "She's learning," she says to Daniel, her voice low. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, others whispering. Justice has landed, swift and merciless, but Laura's pulse still hammers, sensing the bigger fight ahead. "I'm not your charity case, Margaret." Laura Bennett's voice snaps like a whip, her eyes blazing as she faces Margaret Ellison in the Bright Futures Education Hub's cramped office. Her pulse hammers, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth pulse with pain, the memory of Margaret's wine-soaked humiliation at the Grand Plaza auction still burning in her chest. Margaret, stripped of her sequined armor, stands in a plain sweater, her hands twisting, her face etched with shame. The courtroom's verdict, Richard Klein's 7 years and Margaret's 6-month community service, hangs heavy between them. Laura's fingers curl, nails biting into her palms, but her resolve is steel. "I'm trying to make this right," Margaret says, her voice low, trembling, a shadow of her former arrogance. She steps forward, her eyes pleading. "I was wrong. About you. About everything." Laura's lip curls, her voice a blade. "You mocked me, shamed me, because I didn't fit your world." Margaret flinches, her hands shaking. "I was blind," she says, her words raw, cracked. "But I see you now." Laura's chest tightens, pity warring with fury. She doesn't trust Margaret, not yet, but the sincerity in her eyes chips at her defenses. Daniel Harper, leaning against the wall, his sleeves rolled up, watches with a gaze sharp as a hawk's. "Prove it," he says, his voice a low growl. "Words are cheap." Margaret nods, her breath hitching. She pulls a folder from her bag, sliding it across the desk. "This," she says, her voice steadier, "is my redemption." Laura's eyes narrow, her fingers snatching the folder. Inside, a proposal. Ellison Art Scholars Fund, a $10 million endowment for underprivileged kids to study art, based at the community center. Laura's breath catches, her heart lurching. "You're serious?" she says, her voice sharp, probing. Margaret's chin lifts, a flicker of her old pride returning. "I've lost everything, my board seat, my reputation. This is what I have left." Her voice breaks, but she presses on. "I'm giving it to your kids." Laura's pulse quickens, her mind racing. The fund could change lives, buy books, hire teachers, and build studios. But her eyes lock on Margaret's, searching for a catch. "No strings?" she asks, her voice a hiss. Margaret shakes her head, her hands trembling. "No strings, just let me help." Laura glances at Daniel, his nod subtle but firm. She turns back to Margaret, her voice steady, commanding. "You'll work here, teach, not as a photo op, as one of us." Margaret's face pales, her lips parting, but she nods. "I will," she says, her voice a vow. Laura's chest swells, a mix of triumph and hope. She's not forgiving Margaret, not fully, but this is a start. The kids' laughter from the main room filters in, grounding her. This is why she fights. Daniel steps forward, his hand on Laura's shoulder, his touch a quiet anchor. "I'm matching it," he says, his voice firm. "My AI platform, free art education for every kid in Brooklyn." Laura's eyes widen, her breath catching. "Daniel," she says, her voice softening, raw. He grins, a rare spark in his eyes. "You inspired it, Laura. Your heart." Her fingers brush his, a silent pact. They're building something bigger than themselves. Margaret shifts, her hand still twisting. "I'll fund the first studio," she says, her voice tentative but resolute. "Name it after you." Laura's jaw tightens, her voice sharp. "Not me, the kids." Margaret nods, her eyes dropping, a tear slipping down her cheek. The room feels charged, the weight of redemption heavy but real. Laura tucks the folder under her arm, her resolve unyielding. "This doesn't erase what you did," she says, her voice a quiet thunder. "But it's a step." Margaret's shoulders slump, but she meets Laura's gaze, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. A volunteer pokes her head in, her voice urgent. "Laura, the kids are ready for the art showcase." Laura's lips curve, a spark of pride igniting. She's not just surviving, she's shaping a future. As she steps toward the door, Margaret lingers, her hands steady now, ready to follow. The fight's not over, but the tide has turned and Laura's leading the charge. "You can't erase the past, but you can build a future." Laura Bennett's voice rings out, sharp and unyielding, as she stands at the heart of the Bright Futures Education Hub's art showcase in Brooklyn. Her pulse pounds, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth throb, but her eyes blaze with a fire forged from months of battle. Her simple black dress, free of the wine stains and tears from her clash with Margaret Ellison and Richard Klein, is a testament to her resilience. The room buzzes with kids' laughter, their colorful drawings pinned to every wall, each stroke a defiance of the world that once called Laura a nobody. Her fingers curl, nails biting into her palms as she grips a microphone, her voice a beacon for the crowd of parents, volunteers, and reporters. Daniel Harper stands beside her, his hand brushing hers, his touch a steady anchor. His eyes, sharp with pride, scan the room. Kids beaming, volunteers bustling, and Margaret Ellison, in a plain sweater, handing out paintbrushes with a quiet focus that betrays her transformation. Laura's chest swells, a mix of triumph and hope. "This is for them," she says, her voice cutting through the chatter, pointing to a boy whose painting of a Brooklyn skyline glows with promise. "Not for your headlines." Reporters shift, pens pausing, caught by her raw conviction. Margaret steps forward, her face pale but resolute, her hands steady for the first time in months. "I was wrong," she says, her voice low, raw, slicing through the room's hum. "About Laura? About Worth?" The crowd hushes, phones lowering, sensing the weight of her words. "I mocked her, shamed her, because I thought power was wealth." Her eyes meet Laura's, a flicker of shame mingling with sincerity. "I learned it's not." Laura's lips press into a line, her heart twisting. She doesn't forgive, not fully, but Margaret's work here, teaching kids, funding the Ellison Art Scholars Fund, is proof of change. A girl no older than 10 tugs at Laura's dress, holding up a drawing. "Miss Laura, is it good?" Her eyes shine, hopeful. Laura kneels, her fingers brushing the paper, her voice softening. "It's perfect, Maya," she says, her smile genuine, grounding her in the moment. Her mind flashes to the auction, to Margaret's wine splashing her dress, to Richard's crowbar swinging in the museum's shadows. Those scars remain, but this room, these kids, is her victory. She rises, her chin lifting, her voice steady. "Every child here deserves a chance," she says, addressing the crowd. "Not because of money, but because of who they are." Daniel steps up, his presence commanding. "We're making that happen," he says, his voice a low thunder. "My AI platform, free art education for every kid in this city, starts today." The crowd erupts, applause crashing like waves. Laura's heart leaps, her fingers tightening on his. "You didn't have to," she whispers, her voice raw. He grins, his eyes warm. "You showed me why I had to." The words hit deep, a reminder of their shared fight, their love forged in fire. Margaret hands a paintbrush to a boy, her movements careful, deliberate. "Like this," she says, her voice soft, guiding his hand. Laura watches, her chest tightening. Margaret's not the woman who mocked her anymore. The fun, the volunteering, the humility, it's real. "She's trying," Laura says to Daniel, her voice low, reflective. He nods, his jaw firm. "She's lucky you gave her a chance." Laura's lips twitch, a half smile breaking through. "It's not for her, it's for them." She gestures to the kids, their laughter a defiant song. A reporter raises a hand, voice sharp. "Mrs. Bennett, how do you feel about Klein's conviction?" Laura's eyes harden, her pulse quickening. "Justice isn't just punishment," she says, her voice a blade. "It's this, giving kids a future he tried to steal." The crowd nods, some wiping eyes moved by her fire. Another reporter calls out, "And Mrs. Ellison?" Laura glances at Margaret, who freezes, paintbrush trembling. "She's earning her place," Laura says, her voice firm but fair. "One day at a time." The showcase buzzes on, kids showing off their art, parents beaming. Laura steps back, her hand in Daniel's, her heart steady for the first time in months. She sees Maya, the girl with the drawing, laughing with Margaret, who kneels beside her, smiling. A real smile, not the smirk of the auction. Laura's chest swells, a quiet victory settling in her bones. She's not just the billionaire's wife, not just the woman who survived humiliation. She's Laura Bennett, who turned pain into purpose. Daniel leans in, his voice a whisper. "You changed everything." Laura's eyes meet his, her breath catching. "We did," she says, her voice soft but fierce. The crowd's applause fades, but the kids' laughter rises, a promise of tomorrow. Laura tucks the pearl earring, once a clue to Richard's scam, into her pocket, its weight now a symbol of her strength. The fight's over, but the future's just begun, and Laura's ready to lead it. The heart of Laura Bennett's story is clear. True worth lies in kindness and resilience, not wealth or status. Her triumph over prejudice in a criminal empire proves that standing up for what's right can change lives. Have you ever faced judgment and fought back with courage? Share your stories in the comments. We'd love to hear how you've overcome challenges and stayed true to yourself. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more stories of justice and hope. See you next time. Maria Alvarez's jaw clenches so hard her teeth ache. "You think I don't hear you?" She snaps in flawless Spanish, her voice a blade slicing through the hum of the Miami coffee shop. Victor Langston, real estate tycoon, freezes mid-sip, his espresso cup hovering. His tailored suit screams wealth, but his sneer screams contempt. "What's that, sweetheart?" he retorts in Spanish, leaning back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "Keep pouring coffee and mind your place." His business partner, James Carter, chuckles, a low, smug sound, as if Maria's existence is a punchline. She grips the coffee pot tighter, knuckles whitening. The little Havana cafe buzzes with morning regulars. Construction workers grabbing to-go cups, retirees lingering over pastries. But Victor's voice cuts through like a whip. In Spanish, he continues, "These immigrants always stuck in jobs like this. No future, no brains." His words aren't just cruel. They're a calculated jab, meant to degrade her in a language he assumes she can't grasp. Maria's pulse hammers. She's no stranger to insults, but this one burns deeper, slicing into her pride, her past, her years as a translator in Mexico City. Victor snaps his fingers, not even looking at her. "More coffee, now." Maria steps closer, her apron brushing the table. She pours, slow and deliberate, her eyes locked on his. "You think I'm nothing?" she hisses in Spanish, low enough that only he and James hear. Victor's smirk falters, just for a second, but he doubles down. "I said pour, not talk," he barks, cutting her off. James leans in, whispering in Spanish, "She's just a barista. Let it go." But Maria doesn't flinch. Her chest tightens, not with tears, but with a fire she's held back too long. She sets the coffee pot down with a sharp clink. "You're wrong," she says, still in Spanish, her voice steady as steel. "I understand every word." Victor's eyes widen, but he recovers fast, switching to English. "Cute. You know a few phrases. Now do your job." He waves her off like swatting a fly. Maria doesn't budge. She leans in, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I heard more than your insults. I heard your deal." Victor's hand pauses on his cup. James shifts, uneasy, but Victor cuts him off with a sharp glance. "You're out of your depth, girl," Victor snaps in Spanish, his tone venomous. "Stick to serving." Maria's heart races, but her face stays stone cold. She knows what she heard, snippets of a shady real estate deal, forcing out families from a nearby low-income neighborhood to build a luxury resort. Numbers, names, bribes. Victor's arrogance let it all spill. She straightens, her apron stained, but her dignity intact. "You think no one's listening," she says, switching to English so the whole cafe can hear. "But I am." A few heads turn. A construction worker at the counter pauses, mug halfway to his lips. Victor's smirk vanishes, replaced by a flicker of unease. He opens his mouth, but Maria cuts him off. "Keep talking. It's all coming back to you." She turns, her sneakers squeaking on the tile floor, and heads to the counter. Victor's voice follows, loud and commanding. "You're nobody," he calls in Spanish, as if reclaiming control. Maria doesn't look back. Her hands tremble as she stacks cups, but her resolve hardens. She's not just a barista. She's Maria Alvarez, who translated for CEOs in Mexico, who gave up her career to fund her sister's dreams. And now she's the woman who heard Victor's secrets. The cafe hums, oblivious to the storm brewing. Victor leans toward James, muttering something in Spanish, but his voice is lower now, cautious. Maria catches a glimpse of a folded paper slipping from his jacket pocket, landing under the table. It's small, insignificant to anyone else, but her gut screams it's important. She doesn't move for it, yet. Timing is everything. She wipes the counter, her mind racing, plotting her next step. Victor thinks he's untouchable, but he's just lit a fuse. Maria's pulse thunders in her ears, but her face is a mask of steel. Victor's words, "You're nobody," still sting like a slap, but she doesn't crumble. Behind the counter of the little Havana cafe, she grips a rag, scrubbing a spotless mug until her knuckles burn. The clatter of dishes and hum of customers fade as her mind locks onto one thing. She won't let Victor's arrogance win. Her years in Mexico City translating high-stakes deals for men just like him taught her how to hold her ground. She's not just a barista, she's a fighter, and she's done playing small. Victor's voice cuts through again, sharp and mocking in Spanish from his table. What's the matter, sweetheart? Too slow to keep up? He laughs loud enough to draw eyes. James, his partner, joins in, a nervous chuckle, but Maria catches his glance darting to her, uncertain. She sets the mug down with a deliberate clink, her jaw so tight it pulses. Keep talking, she mutters under her breath, her voice a low growl. She steps out from behind the counter, her apron taut against her chest, and walks toward Victor's table, each step a drumbeat of defiance. More coffee? She asks in English, her tone icy, professional, but laced with challenge. Victor leans back, smirking, his Rolex glinting as he waves a dismissive hand. Do your job, not your mouth, he snaps in Spanish, cutting her off before she can respond. The insult lands like a punch, but Maria doesn't flinch. Her eyes burn into his, unyielding. My job, she says, switching to flawless Spanish, is to serve coffee. Yours seems to be tearing down neighborhoods. The words hit like a blade, sharp and precise. Victor's smirk freezes, his fingers tightening around his cup. James shifts, clearing his throat. Let's not make a scene, he murmurs in English, but Victor ignores him, leaning forward, his voice a low hiss in Spanish. You think you're clever? You're nothing here. Maria's heart pounds, but she doesn't back down. She steps closer, her sneakers squeaking on the tile, and lowers her voice to match his. Nothing? She says in Spanish, her words slicing through the air. I heard every word about your deal. The bribes, the families you'll displace. Nothing's what you'll be when they find out. The cafe quiets, a few regulars glancing over, sensing the tension. A retiree at the counter pauses mid-bite of his pastelito, eyes flicking between Maria and Victor. Victor's face hardens, but there's a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He opens his mouth, but Maria cuts him off, her voice steady, lethal. You thought I wouldn't understand. You thought wrong. She straightens, her apron stained, but her posture regal, like a queen dismissing a fool. Keep your secrets close, Mr. Langston. They're not safe anymore. She turns, her heart racing but her steps measured, and heads back to the counter. Victor's voice chases her, quieter now in English. You're making a mistake. Maria doesn't turn around, her hands steady as she pours a fresh coffee for another customer. But her mind is a storm. She's not just defending herself. She's defending her community, her sister, her pride. The paper she saw fall from Victor's pocket earlier burns in her thoughts. It's still there, under his table, unnoticed. She could grab it, expose him now, but she waits. Timing is her weapon. As she hands the coffee to a regular, her eyes catch Victor's. He's watching her, his smugness cracked, replaced by a shadow of unease. She doesn't smile, doesn't gloat. Instead, she nods once, a silent promise. This isn't over. The air in the cafe feels electric, charged with the weight of her words. Victor mutters something to James, his voice too low to catch, but Maria knows she's rattled him. She's planted a seed, and it's already taking root. Victor Langston's fingers twitch against his espresso cup, his polished facade cracking like thin ice. Maria's words, they're not safe anymore, echo in his skull, a splinter he can't dislodge. The little Havana cafe hums around him, but the clink of mugs and chatter of regulars feel distant, drowned by the pulse hammering in his ears. He leans toward James Carter, his voice a low hiss in English. She's bluffing. No way she knows anything. But his eyes betray him, darting to Maria behind the counter, where she's stacking sugar packets with a precision that screams control. Her calm is a blade, and it's cutting deeper than he'd like to admit. James shifts, his tie loosening as he mumbles. She sounded sure. Too sure. Victor snaps. She's a barista, James. What's she going to do? Tweet about it? But his bravado falters. Maria's flawless Spanish, her piercing stare. It's not just her words that sting, it's the certainty behind them. He underestimated her, and now a gnawing doubt claws at his gut. He reaches for his phone, pretending to check messages, but his thumb hovers, restless. That's when he notices it, a folded slip of paper under the table, half hidden by his chair leg. It must have fallen from his jacket during his tirade. Victor bends down, his movements sharp, deliberate, like a predator guarding its kill. He snatches the paper, unfolding it with a flick. His eyes scan the text, a handwritten note from his assistant, Carla Ramirez, listing names of city officials and dollar amounts next to them. Bribes. His stomach lurches. This is the kind of thing that could bury him, and Maria was steps away when it fell. Did she see it? His jaw tightens, teeth grinding as he stuffs the paper into his pocket. Careless, he mutters, shooting a glance at James, who's too busy sipping coffee to notice. Across the cafe, Maria wipes down the counter, her movement steady, but her eyes flick to Victor's table. She saw the paper fall earlier, saw him grab it like a man clutching a grenade. She doesn't know what's on it, but his reaction, his sudden tension, the way his shoulders stiffen, tells her it's trouble. Her heart kicks up, not with fear, but with a spark of opportunity. She's no stranger to power plays. Years translating for corporate sharks in Mexico City taught her how to read men like Victor. He's rattled, and she's the one who shook him. Victor stands, brushing invisible lint from his suit, trying to reclaim his swagger. "Let's go," he snaps at James, his voice clipped. But as he strides toward the door, he pauses, glancing back at Maria. She meets his gaze, unflinching, her hand still on the counter. "You think you've won?" he says in English, loud enough for the room to hear. Maria doesn't blink. "I'm not playing your game," she replies, her voice a quiet blade. The words land like a slap, and Victor's mouth twitches, caught between a sneer and something else, doubt. He pushes through the cafe door, the bell jangling sharply, but the weight of Maria's stare follows him. James trails behind, muttering, "You shouldn't have said that stuff in Spanish." Victor ignores him, his mind racing. That paper, her words. She knows too much, or she's bluffing. Either way, he can't shake the feeling he's misjudged her. Badly. As he steps into the Miami sun, a shadow moves at the edge of his vision. A regular Eduardo, slipping a folded note into his pocket, his eyes locked on Victor. The note's edge peeks out, scribbled with a single word. "Careful." Maria watches them leave, her breath steadying. She doesn't know what Eduardo's up to, but that paper under Victor's table is burned into her mind. It's a piece of the puzzle, and she's not letting it go. She grips the counter, her resolve hardening like steel. Victor thinks he's untouchable, but he's just handed her a weapon. "You think you can humiliate me and walk away?" Victor Langston's voice snarls through the phone, his grip so tight the device creaks. He paces his sleek Miami penthouse, the city skyline a blur beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows. Maria's words from the cafe, "Your secrets aren't safe," claw at his mind like a relentless itch. Her flawless Spanish, her unyielding stare. They've cracked his armor, and he hates it. His jaw grinds, teeth aching as he dials his private investigator, Marcus Reed. "Find her," he snaps. "Maria Alvarez, barista, Little Havana. I want everything. Where she lives, what she knows, who she talks to." Marcus hesitates. "A barista. You sure about this?" Victor cuts him off, his voice a blade. "Do it. Now." He slams the phone down, his pulse hammering. Victor Langston, real estate titan, doesn't lose control. Not to anyone, let alone a coffee-slinging nobody. But Maria's not nobody. That paper he snatched from under the table, the one with Carla's handwritten list of bribes, burns a hole in his pocket. If Maria saw it, if she understood it, he's exposed. His empire, built on ruthless deals and greased palms, could crumble. He paces faster, his polished loafers clicking on marble. He replays her words, her defiance, and a flicker of shame stabs his chest. He shoves it down, replacing it with fury. "She's nothing," he mutters, but the words ring hollow. Marcus delivers the first report by noon. Maria Alvarez, 32, Mexican immigrant, former translator in Mexico City, degree in linguistics from a top university. Victor's gut twists. She's not just a barista. She's educated, sharp, and dangerous. The report lists her address, a modest apartment in Little Havana, and her routine, double shifts at the cafe, volunteering at a community center. Victor's eyes narrow. "Volunteering," he scoffs, but his fingers tremble as he flips through the pages. He heads to the cafe, determined to confront her, to crush this threat before it grows. The bell jangles as he steps inside, his suit stark against the worn wooden counter. Maria's there, pouring coffee, her apron stained but her posture unbowed. "You," Victor says, his voice low, commanding. Maria doesn't flinch, her hands steady as she sets down a mug. "What do you want, Mr. Langston?" she asks, her tone cold, cutting. He leans in, his Rolex glinting. "You think you can threaten me?" he hisses. "I know who you are now. Translator, smart, but you're still out of your league." Maria's eyes lock on his, unflinching. "You don't know me," she says, her voice a quiet blade. "But I know enough about you." She turns, serving another customer, dismissing him. Victor's fists clench, his pride screaming. He wants to drag her back, force her to back down, but the cafe's eyes are on him, regulars watching, judging. He tries again the next day, then the next, each visit a stab at redemption, or maybe control. Maria dodges him, her responses sharp, evasive. "I'm working," she snaps when he demands answers. Her defiance fuels his obsession. He follows her to the community center, lurking in his black SUV, watching her teach kids Spanish. Her laughter bright but her eyes guarded. She's not broken, not cowed. She's a force and it shakes him. His shame creeps back, sharper now. He misjudged her, and it's costing him. Marcus calls with more. Maria's been seen with Eduardo, a regular from the cafe, a journalist with a nose for corruption. Victor's blood runs cold. That note, "Careful," flashes in his mind. Did Eduardo see the paper? Did Maria? Victor storms back to the cafe, his heart pounding. "You're playing with fire," he growls at Maria, cornering her near the espresso machine. She doesn't blink. "You lit the match," she fires back, her voice steady, lethal. He wants to shout, to crush her, but her calm stops him cold. She knows something. He can feel it. As he turns to leave, his eyes catch Eduardo at a corner table, scribbling in a notebook, watching. Victor's chest tightens. He's not just fighting Maria now. He's fighting a shadow he can't see. "Keep your chin up, mija," Maria Alvarez whispers to her sister Sofia, her voice steady despite the exhaustion, carving lines into her face. She's in a cramped community center in Little Havana, Miami, surrounded by a dozen kids scribbling Spanish verbs on worn notebooks. Maria's apron is gone, swapped for a faded t-shirt, but her posture screams defiance. Victor's insults, "No future, no brains," still burn in her chest, but she channels the fire into her work. Her hands move fast, correcting a kid's conjugation with a sharp tap on the page. "Two heirs, not two as," she says, her smile warm but firm. The kids grin back, their trust in her absolute. Maria's world isn't the cafe's grind. It's this: teaching, lifting, fighting for those who don't have a voice. Her sneakers squeak on the linoleum as she paces, her eyes scanning the room. She's not just a barista, she's a lifeline. Sophia, 19, sits in the corner, her college textbooks stacked high, her gaze flickering with pride as she watches Maria. "You're too good for that cafe," Sophia says, her voice soft but fierce. Maria's jaw tightens, not in anger, but in resolve. "It's not about the cafe," she snaps back, her words clipped. "It's about us." She means Sophia's tuition, the hospital bills from their mother's illness, the life she's clawing to build. The center buzzes with life, kids laughing, a volunteer stacking chairs. But Maria's mind is a storm. Victor's words, his shady deal, that paper under his table, they gnaw at her. She knows he's circling, hunting her like a shark. His SUV was outside yesterday, tinted windows hiding his glare. But Maria doesn't bend. She's faced worse. Corporate suits in Mexico City who thought a translator was just a tool, not a mind. She outsmarted them then, and she'll outsmart Victor now. Her fingers twitch, itching to grab that paper, to unravel his secrets. A kid tugs her sleeve, breaking her thoughts. "Senorita Maria, why do you stay here?" he asks, his eyes wide. Maria kneels, her voice low, steady. "Because you're worth it." Her words carry weight, not just for the kid, but for herself. She's not just fighting Victor's arrogance. She's fighting for this community, for the families his resort deal could displace. Her chest tightens, not with fear, but purpose. She stands, brushing off her jeans, and catches Sophia's nod of approval. They're in this together. The door creaks open, and Eduardo slips in, his notebook tucked under his arm. The journalist's eyes are sharp, scanning the room before landing on Maria. "Got a minute?" he asks, his voice low, urgent. Maria's pulse kicks up. She knows Eduardo's been digging into Victor's deals, whispers of bribes, shady land grabs. She steps closer, her voice a hiss. "What did you find?" Eduardo hesitates, glancing at the kids. "Not here," he mutters, slipping her a folded note. Maria's fingers close around it, her heart pounding. It's not the paper from Victor's table, but it feels like a piece of the same puzzle. She tucks the note into her pocket, her mind racing. Victor thinks he can intimidate her, silence her. But here in this room, surrounded by kids who call her Señorita and a sister who believes in her, Maria's stronger than he'll ever know. She's not just a barista, she's a warrior, and this is her battlefield. "Keep writing," she tells the kids, her voice firm, but her eyes flick to Eduardo. Whatever he's uncovered, it's big, and she's ready to dive in. As the kids pack up, Maria lingers, her fingers brushing the note in her pocket. Sophia grabs her arm, her voice sharp. "You're not backing down, are you?" Maria's lips curve, not a smile but a promise. "Never." She steps toward Eduardo, her sneakers steady on the floor. Victor's out there, plotting, but Maria's not running. She's building an army, one truth at a time. "You want forgiveness? Earn it," Maria Alvarez snaps, her voice slicing through the quiet of the little Havana cafe. The evening shift is slow, only a few regulars nursing late coffees, but the air crackles as Victor Langston stands before her, his tailored suit out of place among the worn wooden tables. His jaw twitches, his usual swagger dulled by the weight of her words. Maria's hands grip the counter, her knuckles pale, her eyes locked on his. She's not backing down, not after his insults, not after hearing his shady deal to bulldoze her community for a luxury resort. Victor's here to make amends, but Maria's not buying his act. "I was wrong," Victor says, his voice low, almost convincing. He steps closer, his Rolex catching the dim light. "I shouldn't have said those things." His words are smooth, practiced, but Maria's not fooled. She's heard men like him before. Mexico City boardrooms, power plays disguised as apologies. Her teeth grind, her resolve ironclad. "You think words fix this?" She fires back, her voice sharp as a blade. "You mocked me, my people, in a language you thought I couldn't touch. And that deal you're pushing, it's tearing families apart." Victor flinches, just a fraction, but she sees it. He leans in, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You don't know what you're talking about." Maria cuts him off, her words a whip. "I heard you. Bribes, names, numbers. You're not as careful as you think." Victor's eyes narrow, but he doesn't deny it. Instead, he pulls out a business card, sliding it across the counter like a peace offering. "Let's talk. Somewhere private. I can make this right." Maria's fingers hover over the card, but she doesn't touch it. Her pulse hammers not from fear, but from the fire in her gut. She's not here to be bought. "Make it right," she says, switching to Spanish, her voice steady, lethal. "Stop your resort. Save those homes." Victor's mouth tightens, his patience fraying. "You're in over your head," he snaps, cutting her off. But Maria doesn't flinch. She leans forward, her apron taut, her eyes burning. "And you're out of moves." The words land like a punch, and Victor's hand freezes on the counter. A regular at the corner table glances up, sensing the tension. But Maria holds her ground, her stare unyielding. Victor exhales, forcing a smile. "I'm trying to help you," he says, his tone softer, almost pleading. Maria's not swayed. She's seen his type. Men who think money and charm erase their sins. But as he turns to leave, his briefcase bumps the counter, and a folded document slips out, fluttering to the floor. Maria's eyes lock on it. A contract, with Ramirez scrawled in bold ink. Her heart skips. Carla Ramirez, Victor's assistant, is the name tied to his shady deal. Victor doesn't notice. too busy straightening his tie. But Maria's mind races. This is no accident. It's a piece of the puzzle. She steps around the counter, picking up the document before Victor can react. Careless again, she says, holding it up, her voice a quiet blade. Victor's eyes widen, his hand reaching out, but she pulls back. "What's this?" she asks, her tone daring him to lie. He hesitates, his composure cracking. "Just business," he mutters, but his voice shakes. Maria tucks the document into her apron, her fingers steady. "Business that hurts people," she says. "We're not done." Victor's jaw clenches, but he doesn't push. He knows she's got him. As he leaves, the cafe door jangling behind him, Maria unfolds the document. It's a draft agreement, naming city officials and a land deal tied to Carla Ramirez. Her pulse spikes. This isn't just about Victor's insults anymore. It's bigger, darker. She thinks of Eduardo's note from the community center, still unread in her pocket. Whatever he's digging into, this document connects to it. She glances at the clock. Her shift's almost over. She'll meet Eduardo tonight. Crack this open. Victor's apology was a start, but Maria's conditions are clear. Stop the deal, or she'll burn his world down. You stick your nose where it doesn't belong, you'll lose it, Carla Ramirez hisses, her voice a venomous slash in the dim back alley behind the little Havana cafe. Maria Alvarez freezes, her hand clutching the folded contract she swiped from Victor Langston's briefcase. Her pulse pounds, her jaw clenching so hard her teeth ache. Carla, Victor's assistant, steps closer, her stilettos clicking like gunfire on the pavement. Her sleek blazer and cold eyes scream power, but the malice in her glare betrays something darker. "You think you're clever, barista?" Carla spits, her words dripping with contempt. "You're nothing but a nuisance." Maria's fingers tighten around the contract, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. She's not backing down, not after Victor's insults, not after uncovering his shady land deal, and not with Carla's name scrawled on the document, tying her to bribes and betrayal. "I know what you're doing," Maria fires back, her voice steady, cutting. "This deal, it's dirty, and you're neck deep in it." Carla laughs, a sharp, bitter sound, and steps closer, her perfume choking the air. "You know nothing," she snaps, cutting Maria off. "Stay out of this, or you'll regret it." Maria's chest burns, not with fear, but with fury. She's faced worse. Corporate sharks in Mexico City who underestimated her, dismissed her as just a translator. But Carla's different. Her threat isn't just words, it's a promise. Maria steps forward, her sneakers scuffing the ground, her eyes locked on Carla's. "Threaten me all you want," she says, her voice a low blade. "I've got proof." She holds up the contract, just enough for Carla to see, then tucks it back into her apron. Carla's face twists, her composure cracking. "You're playing a dangerous game," she snarls, her hand twitching like she wants to snatch the paper. Maria doesn't flinch. She's read the contract, names of city officials, dollar amounts, a plan to force families out of their homes for Victor's resort. Carla's signature is all over it, and Maria's gut screams she's more than just an assistant. "You're not protecting Victor," Maria says, her words sharp, deliberate. "You're setting him up." Carla's eyes flash, a flicker of panic, but she recovers fast. "You're delusional," she hisses, cutting Maria off again. "Hand over that paper, or I'll make sure you lose more than your job." Maria's pulse spikes, but she holds her ground, her fingers brushing the note from Eduardo in her pocket. Whatever he's uncovered, it's linked to Carla. The alley feels tighter, the air thick with tension. A regular, Eduardo, lingers near the cafe's back door, his notebook tucked under his arm, his eyes darting between Maria and Carla. He's too far to hear, but his presence is a lifeline. Maria steps back, her sneakers steady, her voice low. "You don't scare me," she says. "But you should be scared." Carla's lips curl, a predator's smile. "You're nobody," she snaps, echoing Victor's insult, "and nobody will believe you." She turns, her heels clicking as she stalks away, but her words linger like a blade in Maria's chest. Maria's hands tremble, not from fear, but from the fire roaring inside her. Carla's threat confirms it. The contract is dynamite, and Carla's the fuse. She thinks of Sophia, her sister, studying late at their tiny apartment, counting on Maria to keep their family afloat. She thinks of the families in Little Havana, facing eviction because of Carla's greed. Maria's resolve hardens like steel. She's not just fighting for herself, she's fighting for them. As Carla disappears around the corner, Maria pulls out Eduardo's note, her fingers steady. It's time to dig deeper, to turn Carla's threat into her weapon. "You're poking a hornet's nest, Maria," Eduardo whispers, his voice sharp as a switchblade in the dimly lit back room of the Little Havana Community Center. Maria Alvarez's fingers grip the contract she swiped from Victor Langston's briefcase, her pulse hammering like a war drum. Carla Ramirez's threat, "You'll lose more than your job," still burns in her ears, but Maria's not running. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding, as she unfolds Eduardo's note, its single word, "careful," now a beacon in the storm. She slams the contract on the table, her eyes blazing. "This is proof," she says, her voice low, lethal. "Carla's dirty and I'm not letting her win." Eduardo, the journalist, leans forward, his notebook scarred with ink stains, his eyes darting to the contract. "City officials, bribes. This is big," he mutters, flipping through the pages. Maria's heart races, her mind sharp from years of decoding corporate jargon in Mexico City. The contract lists names: Councilman Diaz, Mayor's aide Torres, next to dollar amounts, tied to Victor's resort deal that'll evict families from Little Havana. Carla's signature snakes across every page, not Victor's. Maria's gut twists. "She's playing him," she says, her voice ablade. "Setting him up to take the fall?" Eduardo nods, his pen scratching notes like gunfire. "I've been digging into Langston's deals," he says, pulling out a laptop, its screen glowing with hacked emails. "Carla's been emailing a rival developer, Pinnacle Group. She's leaking Victor's plans." Maria's fingers tighten, her nails biting into her palms. She sees it now. Carla's not just greedy, she's a traitor, orchestrating a scandal to sink Victor while pocketing cash. Maria's chest burns, not with fear, but with purpose. She thinks of Sophia, her sister, studying late, counting on her. She thinks of the families facing eviction. This isn't just about her pride anymore. It's war. "Show me," Maria demands, her voice cutting through the air. Eduardo opens an email, its subject line cryptic. "Land deal terms." The text mentions Ramirez and Pinnacle, with coded phrases Maria recognizes from her translator days. She grabs a pen, her hand steady, and starts decoding, her linguistics degree kicking in. "This isn't just bribes," she says, her voice rising with urgency. "They're rigging the city council vote." Eduardo's eyes widen, but he doesn't interrupt. Maria's pen flies, circling names, dates, amounts. Each word is a brick in the wall she's building against Carla. They move fast, cross-referencing the contract with Eduardo's files. A photo surfaces, Carla meeting a Pinnacle exec at a downtown bar, her smile cold, calculated. Maria's pulse spikes. "She's double-crossing Victor," she says, her voice a hiss. Eduardo pulls up another email, this one mentioning a final payment to Torres, due tomorrow. Maria's mind races. If they can trace that payment, they'll have Carla dead to rights, but time's tight, and Carla's threat looms. Maria's not naive. She knows Carla's watching, waiting for her to slip. Eduardo's phone buzzes, a text from an anonymous source. "Meet at 10th Street lot, midnight. Bring the contract." Maria's heart lurches. "A trap?" she asks, her voice sharp. Eduardo shrugs, his eyes guarded. "Maybe, but it's our shot." Maria nods, her resolve steel. She's not backing down. Not after Carla's sneer, not after Victor's insults. She tucks the contract into her jacket, her fingers brushing Eduardo's note. "Careful," it warned. She's careful, but she's not scared. She's a fighter, forged in boardrooms and barrios, and she's ready. They plan the meet. Maria's mind a whirlwind of strategy. She texts Sophia, telling her to stay safe, her fingers trembling, but her message firm. "Don't worry, I've got this." Sophia replies with a heart emoji, but Maria feels the weight of her sister's trust. She's not just fighting for Little Havana. She's fighting for Sophia's future, for the kids she teaches, for every family Victor and Carla think they can crush. Eduardo grabs his recorder, his eyes meeting Maria's. "You sure?" he asks. Maria's lips curve, not a smile, but a challenge. Let's burn them down. As they leave the center, Maria's sneakers hit the pavement with purpose. The contract in her jacket feels like a grenade, and Eduardo's files are the fuse. Carla thinks she's untouchable, but Maria's closing in. The midnight meet looms, a chance to trap Carla, or be trapped. Maria's heart pounds, but her steps don't falter. She's not just a barista, she's a storm, and it's about to break. You're a pawn in her game, Victor. Maria Alvarez's voice cuts like a razor through the tense air of the 10th Street lot, her breath visible in the midnight chill. Her sneakers grip the cracked pavement, her hand clutching the contract that names Carla Ramirez as the mastermind behind Victor Langston's downfall. Eduardo stands beside her, his recorder whirring, capturing every word. A shadowy figure, Victor's contact, a city official named Torres, shifts nervously, his eyes darting to the contract. Maria's pulse hammers, her jaw clenched tight enough to ache. She's not here to negotiate. She's here to expose. Torres stammers, his tie askew. You don't understand, he starts, but Maria cuts him off, her voice a whip. I understand everything. Carla's selling you out. She thrusts the contract forward, its pages trembling in her grip. The document lays it bare. Carla's been funneling bribes to officials like Torres, not for Victor's resort, but to tank his empire for Pinnacle Group, a rival developer. Maria's heart pounds, her years as a translator decoding the coded emails Eduardo uncovered, now clicking into place. Carla's not just betraying Victor, she's orchestrating a scandal to ruin him and seize the land deal for herself. Torres's face pales, his hands shaking as he scans the contract. This wasn't supposed to happen, he mutters, his voice cracking. Maria's eyes burn into his, unrelenting. You took her money, she says, her words sharp, deliberate. You let her play you to destroy Little Havana. Eduardo steps closer, his recorder catching every syllable. Torres tries to speak, but Maria's voice slices through. Carla's emails to Pinnacle. She's been leaking Victor's plans, setting him up for a fall. You're her scapegoat. The truth lands like a grenade, and Torres stumbles back, his breath ragged. Maria's chest tightens, not with fear, but with the weight of what she's uncovered. The families of Little Havana, her neighbors, her students, face eviction because Carla's greed turned Victor's deal into a trap. Her fingers brush the note in her pocket, Eduardo's warning, careful, now a grim prophecy. She's exposed Carla, but the danger's only growing. Torres's eyes dart to the shadows, as if expecting Carla to appear. She'll kill me, he whispers, his voice breaking. Maria's resolve hardens. Then talk, she snaps. Save yourself. Eduardo pulls out his laptop, showing Torres the hacked emails, Carla's correspondence with Pinnacle, promising to deliver Victor's resort deal in exchange for a cut. Maria's voice is steel. She's not loyal to Victor. She's not loyal to anyone. Torres's shoulders slump, defeat etching his face. He confesses in a rush. Carla approached him months ago, offering cash to sway the city council vote, framing Victor as the mastermind. Maria's gut twists. Carla's not just a traitor. She's a predator, and Little Havana's the prey. Maria's mind races, piecing together the stakes. If Carla's plan succeeds, Victor takes the fall, Pinnacle gets the land, and her community loses everything. Her fingers tighten around the contract, her nails biting into her palm. She thinks of Sophia, studying late, counting on her. She thinks of the kids at the community center, their futures on the line. We stop her, Maria says, her voice a low growl. Eduardo nods, his eyes fierce. Torres, trembling, agrees to testify, but his fear is palpable. Carla's out there, watching, waiting. As they leave the lot, Maria's sneakers hit the pavement with purpose. The contract and emails are dynamite, but Carla's still a step ahead. Maria's not just fighting for herself, she's fighting for her people. The truth is out, but the war's just begun. You're a dead woman, Maria, Carla Ramirez snarls, her voice a venomous slash in the glittering ballroom of Victor Langston's real estate gala. Maria Alvarez stands tall, her sneakers scuffing the polished floor, her hand clutching the contract that exposes Carla's betrayal. Her pulse hammers, her jaw clenched so tight it pulses with pain. The crowd, Miami's elite in tuxedos and gowns, murmurs, oblivious to the storm brewing. Carla steps closer, her stilettos clicking like a countdown, her eyes glinting with malice. "You think you can ruin me?" she hisses, her words dripping with contempt. "You're just a barista playing hero." Maria's chest burns, not with fear, but with fury. She's faced Carla's threats before, but tonight, at Victor's gala, where he's set to announce his resort deal, Maria's here to end it. The contract in her hand, proof of Carla's bribes to city officials and her plot with Pinnacle Group to frame Victor, is her weapon. "I'm not playing," Maria fires back, her voice ablade. "You sold out, Victor. You sold out Little Havana." Carla's lips curl, a predator's smile. "You're out of your depth," she snaps, cutting Maria off. "Give me that paper, or you'll wish you'd stayed behind your counter." Maria's fingers tighten, her nails biting into her palm. She thinks of Sophia, her sister, studying late, counting on her. She thinks of the families facing eviction because of Carla's greed. Her eyes lock on Carla's, unyielding. "You're done," Maria says, her voice low, lethal. "This ends tonight." Carla laughs, sharp and cold, but her eyes flicker with panic. She steps closer, her hand darting out to grab the contract. Maria jerks back, her sneakers sliding, but Carla's faster, her nails grazing Maria's wrist. "You're nothing," Carla spits, her voice rising. The crowd starts to notice, heads turning, whispers spreading. Before Maria can respond, two men in dark suits, Carla's hired muscle, emerge from the crowd, their eyes locked on her. Maria's heart lurches, but she doesn't run. She's faced worse. Corporate sharks in Mexico City, men who thought they could silence her with intimidation. "Back off," she snaps at the men, her voice steady, but they close in, their hands hovering near their jackets. Carla leans in, her breath hot on Maria's ear. "Last chance," she whispers. "Drop this, or you won't walk out of here." Maria's pulse spikes, her mind racing. She's cornered, the contract her only leverage. She steps back, her sneakers squeaking, and scans the room. Eduardo's supposed to be here, his recorder ready to catch Carla's confession, but he's nowhere in sight. Maria's alone, and Carla knows it. "You're pathetic," Carla sneers, cutting off Maria's thoughts. "Nobody will believe a barista over me." Maria's resolve hardens like steel. She holds up the contract, her voice ringing out. "They'll believe this," she says, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Gasps ripple through the room, and Victor, across the ballroom, turns, his face tightening. Carla's hand shoots out, grabbing Maria's arm, her nails digging in. "You're finished," she hisses, signaling her men. They move fast, one grabbing Maria's shoulder, the other blocking her path. Maria's heart pounds, but she twists free, her elbow slamming into the first man's chest. "Get off me," she yells, her voice a raw edge. The crowd parts, shocked, as Maria stumbles toward the exit, Carla's men on her heels. She clutches the contract, her only weapon, her mind screaming one truth. She's in danger, but she's not done fighting. The ballroom doors loom ahead, but Carla's voice chases her, sharp and commanding. "Stop her!" Maria's sneakers hit the floor, her breath ragged, but she doesn't look back. She's not just fighting for herself, she's fighting for Little Havana, for Sophia, for every family Carla's deal threatens. As she reaches the doors, a hand grabs her jacket, yanking her back. Her heart stops, but her fire doesn't. She's got the contract, and she's not letting go. "You won't stop me!" Maria Alvarez snarls, wrenching her arm free from the grip of Carla Ramirez's thug in the dimly lit stairwell outside the gala ballroom. Her sneakers skid on the concrete, her heart pounding like a jackhammer as she clutches the contract, proof of Carla's bribes and betrayal, tight against her chest. The thug lunges, his meaty hand grazing her jacket, but Maria ducks, her elbow slamming into his gut. He grunts, stumbling, and she bolts down the stairs, her breath ragged, her jaw clenched so hard it aches. Carla's voice echoes from above, sharp and venomous. "Get her!" Maria's not running from fear. She's running toward the truth. Her sneakers slap the pavement as she bursts into the Miami night. the gala's glitz fading behind her. The contract in her hand is dynamite, but it's not enough. She needs undeniable proof to bury Carla and save Little Havana from the resort deal that'll evict her community. Her mind races, replaying Eduardo's note. Careful. And the emails they decoded, linking Carla to Pinnacle Group's plot to frame Victor Langston. Maria's pulse spikes. She knows where to go. Carla's office, where the final piece of evidence, a paper trail tying Carla to the bribes, must be hiding. She sprints toward her beat-up sedan, parked a block away, her fingers fumbling for keys. Headlights flash behind her, a black SUV roaring closer. Carla's men. Maria dives into her car, slamming the door, her hands trembling but steady enough to jam the key into the ignition. The engine sputters, then roars. She peels out, tires screeching, the SUV hot on her tail. Her heart thunders, but her focus is razor sharp. She thinks of Sophia, her sister, counting on her to keep their family afloat. She thinks of the kids at the community center, their homes at stake. Not today, she growls, swerving through Miami's neon-lit streets. Her phone buzzes. Eduardo. Where are you? His voice crackles, urgent. Carla's goons are after me, Maria snaps, her voice ablade as she weaves through traffic. Meet me at her office. Pinnacle Group building. Now. Eduardo hesitates. It's a fortress, he says. Maria cuts him off. Then we break in. She hangs up, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The SUV's gaining, its headlights blinding. She floors the gas, her sedan shaking, and takes a sharp turn into an alley, losing them for a moment. Her chest burns, not with panic, but with purpose. She's not just a barista, she's a warrior, and Carla's about to learn that. Maria pulls up to the Pinnacle Group tower, its glass facade looming. Eduardo's already there, his beat-up Honda parked crooked, his notebook clutched tight. You're insane, he says, but his eyes spark with respect. Maria's sneakers hit the ground, the contract tucked into her jacket. Got your tools? She asks, her voice low, steady. Eduardo nods, pulling a USB drive and a lockpick kit. They slip through a side door, Maria's heart pounding as they bypass a sleeping security guard. The office is dark, sterile, but Carla's corner suite screams power. Mahogany desk, locked drawers, a laptop glowing faintly. Maria's fingers fly, picking the desk lock with a hairpin, her translator's precision guiding her. Eduardo hacks the laptop, his fingers dancing across keys. Got something? He whispers, pulling up a file labeled Havana Deal. Maria's pulse spikes as she scans it. Bank records, wire transfers, Carla's name tied to Pinnacle's accounts. It's the smoking gun. Proof Carla's been siphoning funds to rig the city council vote, framing Victor for the fallout. Maria's hands shake, not from fear, but from the weight of victory. This is it, she says, her voice a hiss. Eduardo burns the files to the USB, his eyes wide. Enough to bury her, he mutters. Footsteps echo outside. Carla's men. Maria's heart lurches, but she doesn't freeze. She grabs the USB, shoving it into her pocket with the contract. Move, she snaps, pulling Eduardo toward a fire exit. They sprint down the stairs, the thug's boots pounding behind. Maria's sneakers skid, but she doesn't falter. She bursts into the alley, Eduardo at her heels, the USB and contract her lifelines. The SUV screeches around the corner, cutting them off. Maria's chest tightens, her mind racing. She's got the evidence, but she's trapped, unless she can outsmart them one last time. You're finished, Carla, Maria Alvarez's voice thunders through the crowded press conference, her words a guillotine slicing through the murmurs of Miami's elite. She stands at the edge of the stage, her sneakers planted firm, the USB drive and contract clutched in her fist like a loaded gun. Carla Ramirez, poised behind a podium in a sleek blazer, freezes, her eyes narrowing to slits. Victor Langston, standing nearby, his face a mask of shock, grips the arm of his chair, knuckles white. The room, packed with reporters, city officials and developers, falls silent, cameras flashing, as Maria's accusation lands like a bomb. Her heart pounds, her jaw clenched so tight it pulses with pain. She's not just a barista, she's a force, and she's here to end Carla's game. The USB ripped from Carla's office holds bank records and emails proving Carla's betrayal, siphoning bribes to frame Victor for Pinnacle Group's land grab. The contract names city officials, tying Carla to the scheme that threatens Little Havana's homes. Maria steps forward, her voice steady, lethal. "You thought you could hide," she says, holding up the USB. "But the truth doesn't stay buried." Carla's lips curl, a predator's snarl. "You're delusional," she snaps, cutting Maria off, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "She's nobody, a barista with a grudge." The crowd stirs, reporters scribbling, but Maria doesn't flinch. She's faced worse. Mexico City suits who dismissed her, Carla's thugs in the alley. She nods to Eduardo, who's at the back, his laptop linked to the projector. "Show them," she says, her voice a blade. The screen lights up, displaying Carla's emails, her deal with Pinnacle, her payments to officials, her plan to sink Victor. Gasps ripple through the room. Victor's face drains of color, his eyes darting to Carla. "What is this?" he demands, his voice cracking. Carla lunges for the podium mic, her composure shattering. "Lies!" she shouts, cutting off Victor. "She forged it." But Maria's ready. She slams the contract on the podium, its pages fanning out, Carla's signature glaring under the lights. "Forged?" Maria fires back, her words ringing. "Your name's on every bribe. You sold out Victor. You sold out my community." Reporters surge forward, cameras clicking like gunfire. Carla's eyes dart, panic creeping in, but she doubles down, her voice a hiss. "You'll pay for this." Maria steps closer, her sneakers scuffing the stage, her eyes locked on Carla's. "No," she says, her voice low, deadly. "You will." She turns to the crowd, her hand raised, the USB gleaming. "This is for Little Havana, for the families you tried to erase." Her words hit like a fist, and the crowd erupts, questions flying. Councilman Diaz, named in the contract, shifts in his seat, sweat beading on his brow. Victor stands, his hands trembling, his empire crumbling. "Carla," he growls, his voice raw. "Is this true?" Carla opens her mouth, but Maria cuts her off, her voice rising. "She played you, Victor. Pinnacle was her real boss." The projector flashes a final email. Carla promising Pinnacle the resort deal for a 7-figure cut. The room explodes, reporters shouting, officials scrambling. Carla's face twists, her control gone. She lunges for Maria, but security steps in, grabbing her arms. "You're nothing," Carla screams, her voice breaking. Maria doesn't blink. She thinks of Sophia, her sister safe at home. She thinks of the kids at the community center, their futures secure. Her chest burns, not with fear, but with victory. She's exposed Carla, saved Little Havana, and shattered Victor's illusions. As security drags Carla away, Maria turns to the crowd, her voice steady. The truth wins. The cameras keep rolling, capturing every word, every moment. "You're done, Carla." Maria Alvarez's voice rings out, a hammer striking steel as she stands in the Miami City Hall's packed chamber. Her sneakers grip the floor, her hand clutching the USB drive that buried Carla Ramirez. The room buzzes with reporters, their cameras flashing as Carla, flanked by security, glares from the podium, her sleek blazer no match for her unraveling composure. Maria's pulse pounds, her jaw clenched tight enough to ache. She's not just a barista. She's the storm that brought justice to Little Havana. Carla's lips twist, a final snarl. "You'll regret this," she hisses, but her voice cracks, drowned by the weight of evidence Maria